And Blewett's Blitz film review, he has that ability to, trust me, he definitely does. Just his ability to catch balls outside of his frame, his leaping ability, his ability to hang in the air, his yak ability, it's all there. Lowers his helmet, low man wins, bang, rocks a guy.
Hall running free, Brees Hall inside the 10, he's gonna score!
The corners all do their job. You know, if you look at the picture right here, lock.
3rd and 1. Stevens always drilled. What a great defensive play.
I don't try to Monday morning quarterback any of the reviews I do, and I'll try to be honest with a lot of those things I put up.
And you are watching / listening to another edition of Blewett's Blitz, joined by a co-host. I've been solo for a little while, but joined by a co-host in Michael Nania, one Mr. Nania, who is killing it on Twitter, who either people love on Twitter or absolutely hate on Twitter. Very polarizing prospect nowadays. I feel like you either have to love him or hate him when he's getting to his success level at this point, which is, I think, one of the Twitter OGs at this point, Nania. So what's going on, man?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. It's been, as usual, in I was going to say eventful free agency, but in a lot of ways it hasn't been. But it's eventful in the sense that even when there isn't anything going on, the discussion is still raging. And it's interesting to call me an OG at this point, because I guess I am, because I made my account in 2017. So it's been like 7 years. But I remember at that point, I felt like I was behind, like, wow, like this has been around all these years. What have I been missing out on? But it's been a minute at this point, and yeah,
at least one of the OG content guys. At least one of the OG content guys, because a lot of the new content creators came in like the Adam Gase and a little bit even after Adam Gase era. So one of the OG guys for sure. But before this, you were with like Gangrene Nation. You were with a bunch of people before you kind of just, obviously committed to JetX. But yeah, it was the first day was not the most eventful day of free agency. Even before free agency, you had the Sauce Gardner thing. We went on the Pivot podcast. We'll talk about that a little bit if it comes up in the chat. But free agency starts off, Nadia, you see a bunch of offensive linemen go off the board. You had Dotson go back to the Rams. You had a bunch of guys re-sign. And it seems like 85% of the pool of offensive linemen, at least on the interior, was gone. Like first 8 hours, and you're like sitting there like, oh shit, like what are we going to do here? Like we still need 3 offensive linemen. And the Jets start off their free agency with signing Isaiah Oliver, which I think was actually a day or two before, which I guess if you want to get quick thoughts on, we'll talk about that in a little bit. Isaiah Oliver, backup slot, he could play a little bit outside too. Kenny Yeboah, Greg the Leg, and you have a bunch of offensive linemen flying off the board in the first 8 hours. So that first couple of hours into free agency, how'd you feel? And I think the Jets followed up day one by signing kind of their calling card at this point, right? Like George Fant the first year, I believe it was the first year. You had Gerard Davis the 1 year. So you always have a kind of like a random guy the Jets sign on day one of free agency. And I believe this year it was like 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, whatever it was. People were sleeping. John Simpson from the Ravens. So kind of give me your thoughts throughout the first 8 hours leading up to the signing of the John Simpson.
Yeah, it was quiet, but I wasn't too worried because I didn't feel like many of the players I was looking at were going off the board. Like there were a lot of linemen, and we know they needed one, but not that Simpson was a guy that I was keying in on, but it felt like most of the players going off the board that were causing the panic, I was like, I don't know if the Jets should have been in on them anyway. Like you had mid receivers like Gabe Davis and guys like that, and guards getting huge contracts that I didn't think the Jets would be interested in anyway, because they had 3 spots to fill. I didn't see them splurging on I think Kevin Dotson was before the first day, but regardless, you had him, you had Robert Hunt, Ezra Cleveland, all these guys who I didn't see them being in on because of the price anyway. So I wasn't too worried, but at the same time, you going into as big of a season as this feels like, you wanted to see some urgency, and that's still kind of the issue right now. It's like they've done some good moves, which we'll talk about, but it still feels like, if any team in the league should be all in right now, it should be the Jets, and you don't totally get that sense with what they're doing. So there was a little worry for me. I was like, okay, what are we doing here? But I thought they closed it out decently that day. So that first day was Tyrod, Simpson, and Kinlaw, right?
It was all at nighttime. Yeah. So you had
I mean, Simpson, like I didn't, and we'll talk plenty about that, but he was only slightly on my radar before free agency. I kind of wrote him off because he was, coming from Baltimore, it didn't seem like a scheme fit. He was also just kind of like a random breakout because he was only a year ago. He was a reserve future signing with the Ravens. The Raiders cut him, and he won the starting guard spot over there. So I don't like players like that usually who just come out of nowhere. So that's why I didn't really like. After looking at him now, I'm becoming a pretty big Simpson fan. So they got him on a good contract. I love signing Tyrod because we knew they had a serious backup, and I think he fits that mold about well to ask for, especially looking at, Minshew got like 12, 13. He's probably going to compete to start. I think Brissett got the same as Tyrod, so he would have been a good option too. But I like they took that seriously. And then Kinlaw's the guy we got to get into because at first I was okay with it because I was like, all right, I think he's a good fit, good piece in the rotation. But then you see the contract and you're like,
yeah,
I'm not in on this one. So we'll get more into that one. But once the contract came out, I was not a fan of that.
Yeah, we have to get through the moves individually, obviously, because that's what we do. We get a little bit more deep. But I do want to say hello to some people in the chat. Some people, I'm going to try my absolute best to highlight some of the chats. 2-hour show, maybe a little bit past. Obviously, a lot is going on, so I'm not going to be able to get to every single thing in the chat. But saying hello to Dakota. Harold says, "What's up, Joe?" And Nani and I are kind of going to talk later about some of our more realistic expectations for the rest of free agency, and then maybe kind of our dream scenarios. Bakhtiari will be involved in that, but let's get Bakhtiari and a high upside offensive tackle in the third or fourth to learn. Then let's get a weapon in the first. Prefer small trade back if Neighbors not available, and take Brian Thomas. Yeah, we'll talk about some of the draft day stuff, looking at the top 10, what may have impacted in the first round of free agency. Obviously the Vikings might be trading up. Who do we expect now to take tackle, who wasn't going to take tackle before, or vice versa, receiver, etc. So we're going to hit on that. But we're going to keep moving on. Hawk says, I heard Morgan Moses played all last year with a torn shoulder, opting not to get surgery. As far as I'm concerned, he's a liability now. I didn't hear anything about that, Nania. I'm not sure if you heard about him playing with a torn shoulder all year. But if you haven't, I guess I'll just move past it. Eagle says Joe Blue is going to find the plus and let's just get into day one.
I know he missed a few games with it, but yeah.
Okay. We Dakota says we need a receiver too.
I wasn't sure about like if he played through it or anything, but just that he had the injury.
Train says Justin Simmons realistic on our list for safety. I would say no. I don't think they're going to splurge that much. It's almost a little bit of overkill. Dano says Nania, I'm watching you be rational or negativity. I think Nania is kind of sticks to the book and he sticks to the film and he sticks to the stats. And if the stats in the film don't say good things about the player, we're not just going to blow smoke up guys' asses. And for the most part, we've been right. Jordan Whitehead got a small contract for a reason. McCole Hardman got traded for nothing for a reason. Lazard sucked and we kind of called he would suck. Dalvin Cook sucked. We called he would suck. So where are we really so far off where we're like, it doesn't deserve the negativity, So let's see. Joe, you're the man. This stream is unlike this stream, unlike most, is educational with football, unlike many. Yeah, I appreciate that, Matt. And let's get through the first day of signings, and then I'll kind of transition back into the chat, and I'll kind of just keep reading the stuff that's really highlighted. But the first, I don't know if it's the first signing. Maybe it was Isaiah Oliver. Again, we're not going to spend so much time on the really reserved guys, but I'm not sure if you've watched him, if you looked up any stats of him, anything you're impressed with, not impressed with. Most likely going to be you still have Eccles this year, right? So he's corner 4. This is like corner 5. I think he's a guy who could play outside and who could play in the slot. So he's like your corner 5 or 6. Any outstanding thoughts about the Isaiah Oliver kickoff to free agency for the Jets? And I know this was before it actually started, like the legal tampering period, because he was cut or whatever, but it was like our first fresh body to the team. So thoughts on Isaiah Oliver?
No, I mean, I don't think I have any, super in-depth thoughts yet. I need to look into him more. I honestly haven't, but Bryce Hall has left at this point. He went to the Bucks, I believe. Yeah. So that was a hole they need to fill. Justin Hardy's a free agent, so maybe they have to replace that. And Oliver has played a lot of special teams. So, I think he's just a good depth piece to fill out cornerback.
Yeah, 27 years old. I've watched 3 games of him. Length, solid speed, a little bit more stiff, good acceleration, good at hand fighting. Stays pretty square off the line of scrimmage. There's some limitations with his change of direction, with his agility to getting out of breaks. His tackling is not the best. He is pretty versatile in terms of blitzing. I think he's pretty versatile in terms of the fact that he could play inside and outside. I still have to get more into him. Again, I don't want to spend a lot of time on Isaiah Oliver kicking off the stream, but it was kind of the first one. And then moving from a really popular player to another really popular player, Nania, we brought back Kenny Yeboah as tight end 3 at this point. And I'll kind of I'll fold this into another question. We're going to talk about secondary needs, primary needs for the Jets, but they bring back Kenny Yeboah. So you have Yeboah, you have Kuntz, you have Rucker, you have Conklin. Do you think that's an underrated area of need for the Jets at this point right now? I don't know if Rucker proved enough to you last year to be solidified as tight end 2. I think it's a situation where he could be, but he's not necessarily penned into it, right? Like if there's a good deal for, let's say, an old Aaron Rodgers favorite, or not favorite, but like, teammate in Robert Tonyan, like he could compete for 2 or 3. Do you think they're going to just go into the year with his tight end group, or do you think there's a possibility that they grab a guy out there and there's anybody that you're kind of looking at in free agency who could maybe fill that tight end 2 or 3 role?
Yeah, I think it is an underrated need because, I mean, I've been going into last season, and then when Rucker wasn't really playing much, I was a pretty big proponent of playing him more, and I thought he showed some really good blocking flashes. But once he did start to play more, I think it was a lot more inconsistent than people realized. And really, a lot of that playing time came when most of us were checked out anyway, so I don't think it got focused on a lot. But he was pretty inconsistent, I would say, as a blocker once he got to play more. And he could turn into a great one. He showed the potential. Only his second year, barely played as a rookie. So it could turn out, he could turn out to be a great tight end too. I'm not ruling it out. But at the same time, I don't think it's proven yet. So I think if there is someone the Jets like, I don't believe that they would rule out the idea of at least pushing him with some competition, specifically with blocking skills. And that doesn't mean I think they need to go, and this is something that's been rumored, but I don't think this means they have to go draft Brock Bowers with the 10th pick or anything like that. But I'm just saying, if you can get some specifically blocking skill to push Rucker at tight end 2, just give him some competition. I think that's on the table.
Yeah, he left a little bit to be desired last year. I also don't think he was necessarily used in, I'm not going to say the right way, but he wasn't used like to highlight his receiving capabilities. And, there wasn't necessarily enough there where I was like, okay, he's definitely good enough to be tight end 2 or anything like that. I'm okay with it, but if they brought in somebody else, I wouldn't be surprised. But then past that, and this wasn't necessarily in chronological order, but they bring back Greg the Leg, 2 years, $8.4 million. Some people were surprised that it was relatively high. I think you highlighted on Twitter, maybe just in the Slack, that his salary is like the 11th highest for kickers in the NFL, and he's about that good of a kicker. He's a top 10-ish kicker, however you want to quantify that or qualify that. So bringing him back, and then in conjunction with a day or two later, you have Thomas Morstead. There was something in his contract that he had to sign like on that day or a few hours before the start of the new league year, but he hinted towards it. So the Jets, who have struggled with special teams really for the last 10, 15, 20 years for the most part, had 2 guys who were really good at their positions. They decided to bring them both back. Greg the Leg, 2 years, $8.4 million. And then Morstead, I don't know if you actually got the exact numbers, but it was 2 years, 5+, I believe they said. So thoughts on bringing back one of the better duos in the league. It's something that, I think is probably overlooked, but you're talking about the difference in maybe winning the AFC Championship game and not. It could be that punter and that kicker making that last second clutch special teams play. So,
oh yeah, it was a no-brainer. I mean, even Rodgers brought it up on that whatever podcast he was on. It was one of the first things he said the Jets need to do. Yeah, I mean, the Jets for a long time, like we were just cycling through all these random young guys trying to get a long-term solution, which is fine, but it just feels like a kicker and punter. Like you could find a veteran who can do the job at a high level really easily. Like, I mean, we interviewed Morstead on Cool Your Jets today, so go check that out. But he was talking about how it's been a rough road for him the last few years because, like, once you get old as a punter, teams don't really want you because they want that long-term guy. So he was going year to year with 1-year deals. Now he finally gets a nice 2-year deal with the Jets. But once you get old, they kind of cast you off, even though he's still been playing at a really high level. So I'm a huge fan of just get veteran kickers or kicker and punter, and don't mess around with that. So love that they just, stuck with what worked. Keep riding these guys till the wheels fall off.
Yeah, and our next move that we went into, and you kind of already highlighted that you probably like it more than other people do, and it's going to transition into our super chat, which I'll highlight in a second. But later on, the first night of free agency, the Jets sign John Simpson, and we're all kind of sitting there like, who is this guy? And you figure out. I think initially it came out that it was like 2 years, $9 million a year, is like $18 million. We're kind of like,
they said up to 18 million. They've been doing a lot of that this free agency where they're starting with like the up to numbers, and it's kind of misleading. And
do
then
we know what his up to incentives
out.
are? Like, has that come out yet in terms of the incentives for Simpson?
I don't think the exact incentives have come out.
Okay, yeah, 2 years, $6 million, and we can highlight what he is, and I'll just start by saying if this is your worst offensive lineman in your team, you're pretty set. We'll go into his positives and negatives. I've watched, I think, 6 games up to this point, maybe five or six. I kind of like to watch like 3 or 4 games of everybody, get a good feel so I can talk about them and then finish the reviews. So I'm working on Simpson and Morgan Moses right now. But 2 years, $6 million. What is your feel for Simpson? You said that you were obviously more impressed after watching him, at least more impressed than maybe the numbers would indicate you should be. So why do you like Simpson?
Yeah, I think this is my favorite pickup so far. And like I said, I was minorly familiar when they picked him up. I knew he was their starting left guard and that, he kind of came out of nowhere as a scrap heap pickup. And the numbers were pretty good. Like his pass blocking was about 70th percentile among starters in most categories like pressure rate, things like that. They didn't like his run blocking most of the stats, but I watched him. I feel like his run blocking was pretty impressive. It's just, I feel like it was scheme dependent. So that's why I was questionable at first, but then they get him. Then they trade for Moses from the same scheme, from the same team. And it really feels like, which we'll get into, that they are targeting a change in philosophy and scheme with this offensive line. But looking at Simpson, I mean, he's durable. If you look at his game log, he missed some games, but he was a healthy scratch in those. In terms of injuries, I think he's only missed 1 game. So he's durable. He's young. Started every game last year. I really liked his awareness and pass protection. That's something that I think should immediately help this team, like stunts, blitzes, great job passing stuff off, just being able to handle those fluidly, which it doesn't seem like this Jets offensive line has been able to do for the past few years. They see a stun. It looks like they've never seen it before, and they have no idea what to do. But he seemed like he was really good in that area. I thought in 1v1 reps and pass protection, there were a lot of like really good reps where he had to hold up for a long time. And he was able to do that. And the games I mainly watched were against the Rams and the Niners. So I tried to watch him against good competition. I saw him holding up against good players for a long period of time. So I liked his pass protection, run blocking. He gives you that short area explosiveness. He's a good puller. I thought he did good on double teams. So a lot of that gap scheme stuff. So I really like him. I think at the very least, like you said, if this is your worst starter, you're in a good spot with your offensive line. They always say it's as strong as the weakest link. If this is your weakest link, I think you're at the very least talking about an average starting left guard. Yeah. And you're in a good spot if that's as low as it gets on your starting 5. But I do think he could be more than that. And for the price they're paying, and you look at what some of the other guards got around the league, I think he could be a very good value on that deal.
Yeah, he's 27 too, so he's relatively young. Doesn't have a ton of reps on his body. 6'4", he's like 330, 34-inch arms, so he's got pretty good size. Definitely good power. Anchor is really good. Really strong core. Like you said, explosive in a short area. He's not the best in terms of like change of direction, in terms of like adjusting on the fly to movement. And I don't like him in space as much. Like if he's climbing to the second level and there's a safety or a linebacker he has to get to, he is kind of plotting and he leans really heavy, and he ends up on his face a lot in the open field. And even in the run game too, like he has a lot of good power. My problem with him, and this is both in his pass protection and in his run blocking, he tends to duck his head and he tends to have his hands wide. He gets his chest controlled. So there's times where have a pass rep where he dominates a guy because he gets his hands on him, he anchors down, and he's able to control him because he's a really strong base. He's a really strong latch. But then there are times where he gets extended. He has no strong point of contact and kind of falls on his face. So if he can improve his hand punching and not ducking as much, and that kind of goes into the run game too, where he does duck a little bit. And there's a lot of times where he doesn't really take his feet with him into blocks. I want to see him close that ground. As I say, tip to tip, whether it be in the run game or in the pass game, and kind of get more of that lift force versus that push force. And he kind of struggles there at some aspects where he plays a little bit too extended. But overall, yeah, I like him. Again, really good in short area, good power, good on double teams. And this is where we looked at him and it's okay, Simpson, good on double teams, good on duo, good at climbing, more vertical climbs instead of like horizontal climbs, good in short area pulling. Again, I don't love him in the open field, but those are all very conducive to a gap scheme type of system, duo, which the Jets ran a lot of duo inside zone last year as well. They ran some gap stuff, but you get a player like him. And then on top of that, you have Morgan Moses who comes in, and we trade I wrote it down exactly. We traded down from 112 to 134, and we gave him a sixth, and it's $5.5 million for 1 year of Morgan Moses. And he's another guy, when you're watching him one-on-one in the run game, don't love him as much. Duos climb up to the second level more vertically. I like that. Open field, him pulling, Nania, I put up some plays on Twitter. I'm sure you did in your article as well.
Yeah.
He obliterates guys in the open field. And Moses, watching him now, and again, 3 years ago I watched him, I did not like him as much as I liked him now. I remember him being not as good of a player as when I watched him with the Ravens. So I think he's actually improved with age, but really solid in pass pro. His run game leaves a little bit to be desired, I would say. He does play high. His hands do shoot from wide in the run game, but overall, you get him on a combo block, you get him moving in space to a linebacker. Watch out, that linebacker, because he has a nasty streak. But another offensive lineman who is conducive to a duo, power counter trap type of run game, who's not as good in an island in a one-on-one situation. So it's leading me to believe, along with you, Nani, you probably said it. I think you said it first, and it lit something off in my head, and I started watching. He's 100% right, because you have Morgan Moses, who's more conducive to a power scheme and is a great puller. Same thing with Simpson. Same thing with AVT, one of the best pullers we've seen. Tippmann is a really, really good puller. That's one of the main reasons he was drafted. So you have 4 guys who can pull a lot. So power, counter, duo, traps, pin and pulls, all that stuff. We're expecting more of it. And I would say at this point, if the Jets don't do it, they'd be foolish, right? Because all of these guys are really conducive to that scheme.
Yeah, and we'll see what happens. I don't want to assume that Nathaniel Hackett's going to do something smart, so we have to see it first. But
yeah,
it seems too intentional for them not to be trying to do this. And again, maybe it is coincidental, and they just try to make these guys play wide zone, and they suck. Maybe that'll happen. But
yeah,
considering they got 2 starters from the same team, it does feel like it's a focused effort to try and make this change. And if that's what they end up doing, then I think it is something they deserve credit for, because we did not see a lot of adaptability last year at all on the offensive side of the ball. So them to come into the offseason, say it's a good move for, I think, trying to spark this offensive line too, because not that you can't be aggressive or nasty with the zone scheme either, because obviously the Niners are, and a lot of teams that run that scheme, you still can be, but at the same time, I think switching to this kind of scheme can really help just give a little bit of fire to this offensive line and just establish a new sort of feeling of nastiness that they've really been lacking. And with both of these guys that they added, I think you get that. And with a lot of linemen, they just talk about it like they say this guy's nasty or whatever, but I really do think you get that with these 2 players, especially from the scheme that they're coming from. So I think that's the direction they're going. And just because, like you said, you already have Tippmann and AVT who excel at pulling, and the Jets have done some of it, but I don't think to the extent that fully maximizes that ability for those 2 guys. But to be doing that consistently, plus Moses and Simpson coming in here who also do it great, there are a lot of possibilities for them to just get Breece Hall going downhill. Not, instead of pushing him laterally, asking him to make reads, just get him the ball downhill and allow him to hit home runs, which, he did on that the touchdown he had in Denver this year. That was a gap play. Just he went straight up the middle, didn't have to make any cuts. And I think you could really maximize his home run speed that way. And you could do that on zone too. And I think they'll still run it sometimes. But overall, I think we are going to see a scheme change.
Yeah. Now, in terms of some of the things that and this is something I thought about with Moses getting $5.5 million. I'm going to show you some plays of him right now. Him in the right tackle here again, just absolutely laying people out in the open field. It's really fun. But Moses, let's say he was cut for cap reasons, whatever it might have been. What do you think a guy like Moses gets on the open market in today's NFL landscape?
Yeah, I mean the thing, like, I was curious to understand why he only got what he did once he left the Jets and signed with the Ravens. I think it was, I know he has a $5.5 million hit this year. I think it was 315. something like that. I thought he was underpaid there because not that I didn't think he was amazing with the Jets the first time, but durable veteran starter. Thought he was solid. Could have got more than that. But at this point, I mean, the Jets traded essentially a 6th round pick to get him. I think he probably could have gotten a 8-figure 1-year deal or something like that on the open market right now, maybe multi-year, depending on what scheme it is. But either way, the value that they got between both of these players, that's maybe my favorite part of this, is because for what I see them as, especially if they do alter their run scheme to fit them, I think you're getting in Simpson, like I said, at least average at left guard, but I think he could be better. And then at Moses, at the very least, an above average starting right tackle. And then between the two of them, what is it, $11-12 million cap hit? When I thought we would, have to get at least one guy, maybe multiple, with a cap hit like that. So they were really able to fill these 2 spots very affordably. And this is why I think, as we'll talk about this more, like there is room to do some more, since you already filled a couple holes cheaper than we thought you would.
Exactly. Now with Moses, his individual game, I think he probably gets what Jonah Williams got, around $15 million a year. Is he a better player than Jonah Williams right now? Yeah, it wasn't like $14 million a year. I forget who he signed with, honestly. Yeah, he might have signed. Yeah, I think he might have signed yesterday. I think it was like $15 million a year. You're telling me Moses for a year or two can't get what Jonah Williams got, or around that price? I honestly wouldn't be surprised.
2 years, $30 million from the Cardinals.
Yeah.
Wow.
And is he a better player?
He's
is he a better player right now than Morgan Moses, is my question. I wouldn't sign the dotted line on that. Morgan Moses, watching him again, I was definitely impressed. So I think you're getting a plus starter there. I think John Simpson is maybe slightly below average, maybe average. But again, if that's your worst case, if ABT is healthy, he's obviously a very plus starter. Joe Tittman, we're assuming he's going to be a plus starter. So I'm liking that the way that they're handling the offensive line now. We'll see on the rest of the plan. Is the rest of the plan getting a Tyron Smith? Is it getting a David Bakhtiari? And then maybe, I don't know if Josh Jones is a free agent this year or somebody like that, but like more of like a higher end swing tackle. I guess we'll transition there, Nania. What would be your plan for the tackle spot? Because obviously right now we got Simpson at left guard. We have Tittman at center. We have ABT at right guard. We have Morgan Moses at right tackle. We're assuming that ABT is going to play right guard. Now, could the Jets in some weird world want to pair Zeitler with his former running mates and then move ABT to left tackle? I guess that technically could happen. I do think this is obviously all signs are pointing towards him staying at guard, which I don't know exactly your stance on it, Nania. I was pretty steadfast the entire year on keep ABT at guard, and it seems like the Jets are going to make the smart decision and keep him at the position that he's better at. So assuming that, if that is what you're assuming, if not, obviously elaborate on that. But left tackle now, is it Tyron Smith? Is it just the draft? Is it Bakhtiari and a draft pick? Is it Bakhtiari and Josh Jones and you go into the draft with kind of all of your holes plugged? Then you can just take BPA, or what are you feeling is going to happen at the left tackle? Both, I guess, more of your ideal outcome and then more of what you think the Jets are going to do if those things are really, different.
Yeah, I mean, first in terms of ABT, I've stayed open to the idea of tackle just because of looking at how the free agent market was shaping out. It seemed like, it could have been more appealing to let's play him at tackle, get some good guards versus play him at guard and then, settle for whatever scraps to get a tackle. So I've stayed open to it, but I definitely believe and have said I think he's a better guard than a tackle. I think this potential scheme change only further emphasizes that, because if you're talking about AVT at tackle in a power scheme, then I think, that's not as appealing as him in a wide zone, because, now you would need more double teams from him, more climbing, which I think he can do, but it's not as appealing as, sending him out on the edge, leading a wide zone. So I think this potential scheme change only even further makes guard more appealing to me for him. But there are a number of different ways you could do it. I mean, like you said, you could really complete this offensive line with Tyron Smith if you want to. That's an appealing idea to me because, like I said, you filled these 2 spots already a lot more affordably than I think any of us expected that they would. I mean, you brought up Jonah Williams. He's making more per year than both of these guys combined. And I would say that they're both better than him, honestly. Mm-hmm. I mean, Jonah Williams did not pan out the way that Bengals wanted him to, and consistently gave up a ton of sacks and pressures on that team that was infamous for letting Joe Burrow get hit a lot. So you still have the room here to make another splash, whether that's a receiver with a Mike Williams. I mean, he's about the only splash option left. So whether that's him or completing this offensive line with Smith, that's a really appealing way to go because the offensive line's set. I think you look at that 5 there, Tyron Smith, John Simpson, Joe Tittman, AVT at right guard, Moses at right tackle. That's a really solid 5. So that's an appealing route, but then, you have to settle receiver. What do you do there? So the alternative is maybe you splash a Mike Williams. Maybe they go more economical at receiver, get Corey Davis, OBJ, whatever combination they come up with. Rely on the draft for tackle while also getting a Bakhtiari as just a wild card, injury insurance, something like that. So there are a number of different routes they could take here, but ultimately my main kind of stance right now is that whether it's Tyron or whether it's Mike Williams, or if there's another trade or something out there we're not talking about, I would like to see one splash somewhere because they have the ability to do it. I know their cap situation is not amazing. And I know I'm not going to be one of those people who sits here and says the cap isn't real. You can do whatever you want with it. It is real, but and there are real consequences. But this team is supposed to be all in right now. Joe Douglas is going to be gone if he doesn't, make the Jets competitive this year. Yeah. They have the ability to restructure contracts. They just did a big one with Mosley. They could still do that with Reed, with JFM. I believe Quinnen has some possibilities as well. The Zach Wilson trade is still on the table. They've tried to shop Lazard. Not that I think anyone would trade for him. Maybe you could attach a pick to get someone to take him. So there are plenty of avenues to open up cap space. Yeah. It's just about, are you willing to go all in and sacrifice future cap space to make a move that helps you right now? And I think this Jets team should be in on doing that. And I'm not asking them to make 5 different moves like that. Just the one, whether it's Tyron or Mike Williams or whatever. So that's my main thing. I really think that there is an opportunity here for the Jets to complement a lot of these solid hole-filling moves with just one splash that says, like, okay, here's our ceiling-raising addition to this offense, whether that's an elite left tackle, Tyron Smith, or whether that's a guy in Mike Williams, who I think is a high-end receiver, too, to put next to Garrett Wilson. So that's what I would like to see, whichever way they go.
Yeah. Now let's say, because I do think that the Jets are going to sign Bakhtiari, and I think that kind of cancels them out of the Tyron Smith sweepstakes. So let's say it is Bakhtiari, and I think if it is just Bakhtiari, most likely at that point you either bring in a depth guy, maybe post draft if you don't land your guy at 10. But I think if it is Bakhtiari, you probably just draft a tackle at 10. In that situation. And then even looking at the top of the draft with how it's kind of shaped up, if you are thinking more receiver in the draft, you have who's in the top 5. You're most likely going to assume that Arizona is going to take Marvin Harrison Jr., right? So that's one. The Chargers don't have any receivers right now, so that's your second receiver right there. That's probably Odunze. If they trade out and they trade down with the and trade to Minnesota and they come up, you still have the Giants who don't really have receivers. So in my mind, you're not going to have one of Neighbors, Odunze, or Harrison Jr. fall to 10. Now maybe Odunze could, and even with him falling to 10, I'm not obsessed with Odunze. Like, I don't think that's a slam dunk pick at 10, but I think there's a more realistic possibility that a solid tackle gets there at 10 than I can guarantee that one of the big 3 guys get there. So let's say that's more realistic, that they are going to splash at receiver because how the draft is going to work out in conjunction with them signing Bakhtiari. So I know you hinted towards it being, obviously, maybe potentially Mike Williams. Is there any other moves you'd like to see at receiver, like any other splash guy you see out there because they do sign Bakhtiari? Let's say that happens, and now they're looking for their splash. Or do you think it's maybe more realistic? And I know this is kind of like what Nania wants to splash. Nania wants the Deontay Johnson, whoever else we didn't land, or Mike Williams or whatever. But do you think it might be more realistic for them to land, Corey Davis and just get Odell Beckham or Kyler Boyd or something like that?
I definitely think that's more realistic and likely. And like it can work. Like, say Corey Davis comes back and they couple him with Tyler Boyd, or maybe you get an OBJ, Hunter Renfrow got cut as well, or whoever you get here. Like, that could be a good receiver trio. And if everything works out, Aaron Rodgers stays healthy, offensive line plays great, you can go compete with that. It's just, I feel like, getting a Mike Williams can take this offseason from maybe a B+, maybe an A- to, okay, maybe a potential A+, because we filled a lot of holes and we also got, some higher end talent that could raise the ceiling. So that's why I would like to see that. But I'm not opposed to the idea of, the more well-rounded receiver approach, I guess.
Yeah.
But Corey Davis coming out of retirement, I know you and I are both, two people who are higher on him than I think most Jets fans were while he was here. But then Alan Lazard comes in, and now all Jets fans want Corey
They realize
Davis suddenly.
that Corey Davis is actually good. Like right now, like I think, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but me right now, if I had to sign the dotted line for Corey Davis as receiver 3 next year, I'm not even saying like I'm not like running screaming in joy to sign the dotted line, but I'm pretty excitedly signing the dotted line for Corey Davis as receiver 3.
Yeah, same. I mean, we'll see what he gets. After a year of retirement, does he maybe come pretty cheap, or in this receiver market where there were a lot of very nice deals signed by players who may be above their value on the field, like does he go into that market? I'm not sure what his price is going to be, but I would also be very much on board with him as the 3rd receiver, regardless of Mike Williams or not. I think he has a place on this team. I was really excited to see him play with Rodgers last year. I think his ability to get over the middle and make tough contested catches in that part of the field really complements Aaron Rodgers as well. I thought he's going to feast in that part of the game. So I think he would have a great role in this offense with Rodgers.
Yeah, and now with that, like if he were to hit, and I guess we're kind of assuming that he's going to be the Corey Davis he was when he left, but if he hits free agency right now, he's probably the 2nd hottest commodity out there past Tyler Boyd, right? I would say he might get the 2nd biggest contract. Now I'm hoping that he doesn't like spurn the Jets and just walk away in August and then they grant him his release and he goes to a new team. Like I'm hoping he's gonna be somewhat favorable to the Jets. And we heard some rumors out there, I don't know if it's The Athletic or whoever, who they've just been absurdly wrong the last couple of weeks. The Athletic with this guy's going to sign there and they don't visit, or Mike Evans is going to test the market and then he doesn't. So that's kind of funny. But nonetheless, hoping Corey Davis comes back now. Again, what is the price going to be? But Mike Williams, because it is frustrating, Nani, and like this is something that we've talked about so much, just because we're obsessive Jets fans, and we are co-owners of the same website and all that stuff, and we talk a lot. It's like over the years, the amount of Slack messages for please sign Hopkins. Oh my God, no Hopkins. Oh, no, Deontay Johnson. Oh, he's traded for a bag of chips. No Deontay Johnson. Begging for Amari Cooper a couple of years ago. Oh, no Amari Cooper. Jerry Jeudy goes for a 5th and 6th. No Jerry Jeudy for the Jets. Keenan Allen for a 4th round pick at $18 million a year. And I think maybe another $5 million bonus. But still, so you see all of these receivers consistently go off the board and the Jets don't grab them, which is frustrating. Like I think and we'll talk about it, but right now, at this point, and it's very early to grade free agency, but it's like a B- for me right now. One of the reasons being that they've missed on some receivers, whether it be whoever your preference is, Jerry Jeudy, Deontay Johnson, Keenan Allen, any one of those guys I would have signed up for right now. And the Jets are currently sitting at this point. I don't know if they're actually trying to get rid of Lazard. And we did hear like a rumor that they maybe didn't want to bring Corey Davis back because he fills the same role as Lazard, which is just stupid to me because Lazard didn't play for 3 or 4 games, healthy scratch for like 3 UDFAs, not even 1, not even 2, but 3, considering I think Irvin Charles is a UDFA too. And he got playing time over Alan Lazard. So he's your receiver 2 right now. You have absolutely nothing past Garrett Wilson. And we're sitting on our hands with all these receivers going. So decent start to free agency. Again, I like Simpson. I really like the Moses signing. I really like the special teams aces. We'll talk about the defensive line. The Kinlaw signing, the Fatu signings knocked down the grade a little bit for me. I don't love those guys, and I don't necessarily love on relying on either one of Kinlaw or Solomon Thomas to replace Quentin Jefferson. But that's, again, a story for later on in the stream. But the biggest gap in me giving them like a really good grade is the receiver position. If they do not address this in a very serious way, and it is just, MVS and Josh Reynolds or something like that, I'm going to be relatively upset, not because I don't think the Jets could get by with some of those like tier 3 receivers, but because there's so many guys out there for such little price. I know Deontay Johnson had some locker room issues and with the Steelers. I think you'd be less of a problem with Aaron Rodgers throwing the ball versus Kenny Pickett. And he went for chump change, like $9-10 million a year, whatever he's getting paid. So the Jets, I'm in a big holding pattern because they better splash that receiver. And again, splash doesn't have to mean Mike Williams or anything like that, but hey, get me Tyler Boyd and Corey Davis has to comes back, but something significant at receiver has to be done, or the grade is going to take a significant hit for me this offseason.
Yeah, and since you bring that up, like I want to say, and I think this speaks for both of us. Like I don't think either of us are these type of fans who sit here and we see every single star trade and we're like, why didn't you get this guy? Why didn't you get this guy?
Yeah.
Like it's not just like a hunger for a splashy name or anything like that. I think we both agree that seeing some of the prices in terms of trade that some of these receivers have gone for, they would have been smart moves for the Jets, any of those, even if you outbid what they got by a little bit. I think considering how severe their receiver need is, and it is severe because after Garrett Wilson, I mean, you play a game today, you have undrafted Xavier Gibson and benched soccer-playing Alan Lazard as two of your three starting receivers.
It's terrible.
They have the worst receiver group in the league after the number one. I think that's pretty clear. So it's a severe need, and they're in an all-in position, and a lot of these trades are, we're a lot more affordable than I think I expected them to be. So we're not sitting here asking for these receivers just because, like, why aren't you getting every single player? It's more like, overall, when you look at the past 2-3 years, there have been so many of these trades, and you can't make every single one. We're not asking you to, but most of them work out. You think about the Coopers of the world.
Dude,
and the
Cooper
Browns,
was the one, man.
Tyreeks. That was the one. So, like, there have just been a lot of opportunities. It feels like at some point the Jets should have had one of these guys, and they should be sitting here with a really good 1-2 with Garrett Wilson and another very good receiver. But instead, they're here, still very desperate at receiver. And they could save face, like you said, get Corey Davis, get Tyler Boyd. It's a good group, and you can get by with that. And they could have a strong season for sure. So I would totally be okay with that. But at the same time, it's just a little frustrating when you see some of the, trade costs that some of these guys go for. And you're like, being as desperate as you are, couldn't you have got in there and made it one of these trades somewhere?
Now, again, if they have a plan and it works out, great. If they don't and they have egg on their face, it's going to be a problem for me because there's a way. Again, the Mike Williams of the world. I don't know if you have any dark horse candidates who you can think of, like who can get traded for in the receiver market, because there's always like that dark horse guy who may be traded for. It was kind of Keenan Allen, and that came to fruition. Some people talked about.
I mean, maybe there's Ayuk that's kind of been talked about. I saw
what is the price of
rumors?
What is the price of Ayuk?
But then that's the thing about these trades, because if Ayuk goes, probably talking about first round pick plus, but Deontay
and the contract, and
Keenan Allen were out there.
Yeah,
like a lot of people I have seen talk about Keenan Allen not being, that much of a player to miss out on. And I get it. He's older. There's a pretty decent cap number with him, but
he's good.
He averaged 96 yards a game last year. So he's still really, really good. And I know he misses some games, but the guy he's pretty underrated in terms of how much of a star he has been throughout his career. So
he would get like 1,300 yards with the Jets this year.
Let's just do $18 million cap hit in a world where Calvin Ridley got $24 million and Gabe Davis got 13. I would be all for that. I would go up to a third round pick to have gotten him personally.
I would have given a fourth for Deontay. I don't know. They got like a fifth and a sixth or whatever it was. So do you have any dark horse candidates? And then I want to follow that up with also T. Higgins, because he's another guy who's rumored, wants to be traded. I would say I'm pretty lukewarm on the T. Higgins thing, just considering you're going to have to give up probably a second or third round pick, whatever it's going to be, if not more. I don't know exactly their asking price. And then you're giving, considering you say Calvin Ridley got the $22 million a year, what is Higgins going to get? Especially if you're trading for him, he has you by the balls in terms of like the contract. So you're talking probably $25 million a year for Higgins, if not more, plus a second or third round draft pick. So I don't know how willing you are to do the T. Higgins thing, and then if you have any kind of like dark horse candidates. I know some people talked about Terry McLaurin. It seems like they're trying to kind of compete a little bit this year in Washington. Like they've brought in quite a few vets and stuff like that. So I don't know if they're just going to get rid of Terry McLaurin, but do you see any dark horse candidates out there?
Yeah, I'm not sure in terms of dark horse candidates. And you bring up T. Higgins. That might be where I draw the line in terms of, you mentioned it, he's going to get a huge contract. The trade cost is probably going to be very significant. So that's probably where I'm like, you know what? Maybe it's not as exciting, but it's probably better to just settle for multiple solid receivers for a much lesser cap hit, save the draft picks. I'd probably take that route if you have to be so aggressive for T. Higgins. But we'll see what happens. I mean, what do you think of Mike Williams as a player in terms of his fit here? Like, is he a type of guy you'd be okay with as, like, say he gets 18 to 20 million,
Yeah.
whatever it is. Like, is that a price you'd be willing to pay for him for what he brings?
It depends. It depends on like he had an ACL or knee injury like pretty late into the year last year, right? So it kind of depends on like how
it was
healthy
early.
he
It
is.
was early. He played 3 games.
It was early.
Third game. He had that.
And it's not like he's the David Bakhtiari of receivers, right? Like he's played 13, 14 games,
right.
or like somewhat like that or something like that. And then obviously this year he missed most of it with the ACL injury. But I think he takes advantage of what Rodgers does really well in terms of like back shoulder balls and stuff like that. He's almost like, Alan Lazard is the poor man's Mike Williams, like that's what Alan Lazard wants to be. So if you could sign him, I think he's a really solid number 2, contested catch guy, ends red zone, like a true red zone threat. So I'd be more than willing. And I know people like, oh my God, $18-19 million for Mike Williams. Look at the market, what's his name? Like you said, for Gabe Davis just got how much from that? Was it $13 million a year from the Jaguars or something like that? I think maybe even more with incentives.
Darnell
so in
Mooney,
this market,
13.
Yeah, Darnell Mooney, 13. So I would be willing to do it, but I'm like teetering on, would you rather have the Mike Williams of the world, and I don't think this is necessarily one or the other, but like Mike Williams, or do you just go more well-rounded with the Tyler Boyd, Corey Davis, and then even past that, like I don't think getting Tyler Boyd and Corey Davis prohibits you from drafting a guy at 72 in the third round and then knocking Lazard down to 5. Maybe that's a little bit of overkill. And again, in another world, you're more than, I think the Jets, it's a possibility where they could bring in Corey Davis and Mike Williams. Like that's possible as well. But I'm almost leaning. I really don't know if you had to choose one or the other, like the Boyd and the third round guy or Corey Davis, or just the big splash at 2. Would you rather have it more well rounded or a little bit more top end heavy? If you had to choose, obviously you kind of in a perfect world could do both. But
I think Corey Davis's cost is the big factor here, because what if he is so cheap coming off of retirement that you could sign Mike Williams and still squeeze Corey Davis in there? Then
okay, so let me restructure it.
Really good scenario in that point. Yeah.
Mike Williams, let's just do 1 year thing. Mike Williams, $18 million cap hit this year. Tyler Boyd and Corey Davis, $18 million cap hit this year.
It's tough. I've said I want that splash, but then it becomes a question of who is that third receiver, and you could draft one in the third round who will probably be a good prospect because it's a deep class. But like I feel like with Rodgers, his 22 season with Green Bay, the biggest storyline was the young receivers, him not having chemistry with them. I don't know. I'm very torn on that, but I'm gonna say Williams. That's my gut reaction to it, just because I really want to raise the ceiling going into a season like this. Is Davis and Boyd solid? Can they win a lot of games? Yes. But when you have to go through Baltimore, Kansas City, Buffalo, Cincinnati, all these teams, a lot of which have very good receiver duos and great quarterbacks along with them, I want that top end ceiling. And you look at Mike Williams, I know a lot of people sleep on him, but this is a guy who over the last 3 seasons, his average numbers per 17 games, 84 catches, over 1,200 yards, 7 touchdowns. So if you put that next to Garrett Wilson and he stays healthy, which I know is a question, but before the ACL tear, he was playing 15 games a year on average over the past 5 seasons. So he's not injury prone the way a lot of people talk about him as. Like, I think there's a really high ceiling there if you put him next to Garrett Wilson. So I am going to go with that, but I'm also not going to overlook the, how solid it would be to have a 3 deep kind of group with Corey Davis and Tyler Boyd.
The inner, like, depressed Jets fan in me who's been kicked while I'm down the last, 20 years almost wants me to be like safer with Corey Davis and Boyd. But I think I'm like 51% with you in terms of like Mike Williams have the ceiling. I think he could be really fun with a quarterback like Rodgers who loves throwing like back shoulder seam balls and things like that. So Mike Williams could be fun. And then obviously you're hoping that, with that being said, Hackett can take advantage of a more like vertical receiver. So that's obviously, a question. And then you're hoping that the Jets training staff, if he is a little bit banged up, take it easy on him. Let him skip a game before he actually gets like super banged up and kind of manage him as a veteran. So I do want to get to a super chat. We'll get to both of our super chats. This one from Danielle Murphy. I don't know if you can hear that, Nani. You're supposed to be able to hear that. If you can, then I thought, okay, I can't hear it. When I do that, I can't hear it. Only you guys can. But nonetheless, Daniel Murphy says, great duo for a show. Are we switching to a gap scheme? And you prompted this in my head, Daniel Murphy, and then I completely forgot you sent a super chat, so we kind of already hit it. And if we do you think ABT and Tippmann will do well in the gap scheme? So let's kind of bounce back to that and kind of just reiterate why we feel like they are switching to gap, and then do we feel like if ABT and Tippmann will do good on it?
Yeah, I mean, like we both said, I think it is a good fit for both of them because of the pulling ability, mainly. I think they're both tremendous at that. And then I think they could also get a lot of vertical downhill movement as well. I mean, if you look at Tippmann on the Breeze touchdown against Denver this year, he got a lot of movement just blocking down to set up the pull. So I think they both would fit really well in that type of scheme.
Yeah, I think Tippmann would do even better. I think they would do even better because I think both of their plus traits like have to do with pulling. So I would really like to take advantage of their athleticism, and then you kind of have like two road graders in terms of Simpson and Moses. And like I said, with Moses, he's really consistent. In the run game, but like with him especially, I really like him in gap versus zone, because zone, you're more one-on-one, you have to be a little more patient, you kind of take a guy where he's going. And Moses in space, he's a little bit more lumbering, he doesn't have the most like athletic ability, but when you kind of define his role for him, it's a little bit better. When he's one-on-one with a guy, he tends to duck his head, he tends to stall his feet, and hands are wide as well. So him in conjunction with Simpson, like really just emphasizes the fact that they should at least switch to the gap system. And I think ABT and Tippmann will do just as well, if not better. Another super chat from Blitz Crew, $2 super chat. It says 15 days until UFL starts. You guys hyped? Is the UF, is that like is there another, I mean, like a football league that I don't even know about, or is this something you know about, Nania? Because you're the one who you just laughed a little bit. I don't know if I know what the UFL is.
That's news to me. I don't know. It's just, I feel like there's a new version of these leagues every single year.
So little to say that we are not so hyped for the
one with
UFL.
The Rock. Isn't The Rock doing one? I don't know, man.
Totally I knew there was one. It was the American Football League. I forget exactly what it was, but it had the New York Guardians, and I think they were going to have some games at MetLife. And I remember I bought a Guardian shirt because why not? Like, why not root for another team? I was going to go and sit first row and have a couple of beers and watch, the Guardians with another 1,000 people. And then they canceled the team like a year after. I was like, this is fucking stupid. I don't really look into that stuff anymore. But let's keep going down in the chat. We'll say hello to some people, answer some questions, and we'll get back to the rest of free agency plans at 10, maybe some other dark horse additions for the Jets. Why are we switching to gap scheme? We kind of already went over that. Dano says, I'm just here because Daniel Murphy utterly swears by Joe Blewett. I appreciate your support, Murphy. Let's go to another super chat, which I don't see anything on it, but he just wanted the soundbite. Let's see. I'll see if there's a question under his super chat. I'm sorry, Marvin, but I'll get to it in a second. Nobody wants to play here. Who can blame them? Money talks. I still do think it's absolutely atrocious that they don't account for taxes in certain states. It's just ridiculous that $20 million goes so much farther in Miami or Texas than it does in New York. I don't understand how that works, but nonetheless, today marks day 5. Have we spoken to any receivers at all? There was the rumor that it was us, the Steelers, and who else for Tyler Boyd. And then past that, Nania, I know you at least looked in, you did like 1,000 free agency profiles and all this stuff. I think most of it was offensive linemen, but just individually with Boyd, we kind of glossed over him a little bit. But if he were to get signed, hopefully, let's say now he signs a 2-year, $22 million deal with the Jets. What are your thoughts on Tyler Boyd? Slot, outside. I know he's mostly slot, a little bit bigger, but overall thoughts on him as a player and what he would bring to the Jets. Because that's the only guy I've really heard them rumored to be speaking to, right? You had Mike Williams get released, and then Daniel Jeremiah, who's been a little bit of a mouthpiece for Joe Douglas, said like, oh yeah, really good fit, whatever. And then you heard that the Jets were interested in signing him in the 2021 offseason. Was it when he got extended, I believe? So yeah. He's a rumored a little bit too, but Tyler Boyd, if you had to, or not if you had to, but overall thoughts on him as a player if he was added.
Right. Yeah, I would be a fan of it. I think the biggest thing with Boyd is that he's a great floor raiser. I don't think he's much of a ceiling raiser. Like, he has great hands and he's a big body out of the slot. He's 6'2", 203. But yeah, he does play mostly in the slot. But he's great on contested catches over the middle, very rarely drops passes. And I watched a little bit of him earlier today, and his route running is pretty solid. I mean, I think maybe he's not as great. He used to be a 1,000-yard receiver, but at this point, that was 5 years ago, 2019. So maybe not quite at that level. I know they, supplanted him. They got T. Higgins and they got Jamar Chase. But as a third receiver with those two guys the past couple years, he's been a pretty solid, third guy out of the slot, just very steady. So I think that's what you get with Tyler Boyd. It's not going to be super exciting or anything like that, but I think he's just not going to make a lot of mistakes and be pretty reliable. So that's where going back to our previous conversation with, say him and Davis versus Mike Williams, it's sort of a debate of do you want the depth and the reliability, or do you want to maybe take a risk and shoot for a higher ceiling with the Mike Williams, who maybe he's more injury prone. Maybe the depth chart isn't as great. If you splurge on him instead of getting two guys, maybe he has a little more. He's not as steady as a Boyd, but the ceiling is a lot higher. So I think Tyler Boyd really does emphasize this debate in terms of do you want to play it safe, because I think he's a very
super
safe player on the field, or do you want to take a bigger shot?
Yeah. So let's hit on this topic too. Huff signs a was like 19-ish million dollars a year with the Eagles or something like that. Maybe 17 to 19. I forget exactly what it was, but he leaves. It's unfortunate, man.
3 year, 51, 34 guaranteed. So about 17 a year. Yeah.
So you have a UDFA. And the Jets flubbed this, right? At the end of the day, they flubbed it. After they drafted McDonald, if they knew that they weren't going to re-sign him gather up the money to re-sign him during the season, if they knew they weren't going to be able to trade him in season. Last year, we have all these analytics, and you have these analytical departments in the NFL, which are saying that, hey, this guy is really productive in limited snaps. With greater snaps, he may be more productive. So why not maybe be a little bit cautious, or a little bit, act before you're kind of your face is in the fire, and sign him early. They didn't sign him early. They don't trade him during the season where you could have got at least something for him. So now you're hoping for a comp pick, which may not even happen based on the rest of the signings that the Jets make. So a team that was looking for a stud edge rusher since John Abraham developed their own and then let them walk for most likely nothing. So it's egg on their face, regardless, in my opinion. They should have done it. Maybe not even this offseason, but again, last offseason at least traded him. So not the best for the Jets in terms of that. He leaves, and now you have so I want you to hit on that, obviously. And now the Jets depth chart at the end looks like JFM, JJ, McDonald, and Clemens. And now you have rumors that Jadeveon Clowney is going to visit with the Jets on Monday or Tuesday, or maybe fly in Monday, visit them on Tuesday. So overall thoughts on losing Huff for most likely nothing, maybe a comp pick, if that, and then Jadeveon Clowney coming in to visit on Monday or Tuesday.
Yeah, they really botched this situation, because when you have a player of that value, it should lead to something in the end, but they're going to come away with nothing now. And there were a lot of ways they could have had the foresight here, because we all knew after 2022, we watched the games, you and I watched the film and saw the analytics and all that. We knew he was a hidden gem in the making. And at that point, you had an opportunity to either extend him at a low point in his value, or, if you knew you weren't going to re-sign him, and you could also have done this last year during the season, you could trade him if you knew you weren't going to bring him back. But now they're going to get nothing, because he's not going to get a comp pick, most likely, because of the signings that they're making are going to cancel him out. So just not good management with that situation. And then in terms of Clowney, is that what you wanted to hit on next?
Yeah, and we'll get into the defensive line and the interior defensive line, and we'll talk about Kinlaw. I think we're both going to agree why it's just a bad contract. It is, but nonetheless, Clowney for $10, $11, $12 million a year, and then you have Kinlaw for $7.5 million, whatever exactly it is, and people are arguing hey, if you're going to sign Clowney and you sign Kinlaw, we could have used that money to sign Huff. Now, with that being said, I think you acknowledge this, and maybe we don't emphasize it enough during stream or whatever it may be. There's two sides to it. It's not like Madden where, hey, I offer Huff $18 million. The Eagles offered him $17 million. He automatically signs the higher contract. It's not like that. He could have said, I don't want to live there. I don't like the Jets, whatever. They're not going to play me full-time role. I wasn't going to sign there regardless. But in terms of bringing in Clowney, 10 sacks last year, really good run defender. I think I think people just hate it in general because you look at Huff and it's like, oh, we got rid of Huff. Now you're bringing in a guy to replace Huff, like 1-for-1. He's on a 1-for-1 replacement because he's going to get a lot less money. I actually don't hate it. I'll be transparent. I think he's still a good player. Really good run defender. The only thing that concerns me, it might be a little bit like overdoing the run defense on the edge for the Jets because let's say it is 3rd and 1. Who are you playing at edge defender? You have JJ plus run defender, Clowney plus run defender, JFM plus run defender. So do you like the player in Clowney? 1. 2, the argument of, okay, well, just for the price of Clowney and Kinlaw, you could have had Huff. And then 3, do you think it's maybe a little bit of overkill in terms of the type of D-end we're going to have, and you'd rather maybe a pass rush specialist versus a run stuffing guy first?
Yeah. So first on the resources part of it, I think there's a little skepticism there because, if in the end they don't address the offense to the point that we would have liked for them to do it, and they do also sign Clowney to whatever he gets, I think it will be, marginally, suspect the fact that, okay, you're able to fit these 2 signings in here that, not necessarily. Not saying you didn't have to fill those holes at D tackle and on the edge, but you didn't necessarily have to spend those types of resources, whereas the offense did demand a lot of investment. So I do somewhat feel that way. But at the same time, they did have to address some of these holes. And in terms of Clowney, like I'm with you that I'm not totally mad at it because I do like the player. And he did have a really big year last year, 9.5 sacks. He had over 70 pressures. It was a pretty random huge pass rushing year. I know usually he still brings a great run defense. That's what he's always been great at. But I just brought up his numbers right here. He's like, he alternates year to year at the pass rushing. He had 9.5 sacks this year, 2 the previous year, 9 before that, 0 before that. So he's kind of, you don't know what you're going to get with the passing game. But yeah, I think there is an aspect of what you said in terms of the skill set fit because he's not a 1-to-1 Huff replacement in any way because Huff's role was, we're very much leaning to the pass game with when we're using him so he can be fresh and get after the quarterback. And Clowney can do it as well, just not nearly to the level that Huff can. Then you also have his run defense, which can't be quite as maximized when you already have JJ and JFM as like your base starters on early downs. So it would be an interesting fit in that way, but he did have a huge year. We know they like depth on this defensive line. So I could see it making sense if the price is right. But at the same time, I just really feel like this should have been an offseason that was all about the offense. If we have to, cut it a little short on defense, maybe make some bargain bin signings, rely on our coaching staff to develop talent, which they've done really well. Like they've done you look at JFM, you look at Quincy, Tony Adams, they've developed talent really well. They've shown they don't have to make huge investments to make the defense good. Yeah. Whereas on offense, I feel like there's just such a huge talent deficiency. They should have really aggressively honed in on it, and they still have the opportunity to do that. So I would be somewhat, questionable of the resource allocation if they were to sign Clowney to a deal that is, I don't know. What would you be okay with signing him for if he were to come in? Like, do you have a number in mind?
Yeah, I don't know. It's like 12. It's like 12 to 14. You'd think like 12, 13 mil.
Yeah, probably.
And maybe even more like 10 sacks. Really good run defender. It might even be $15 million. And at that point,
his value is really high right now. He just had one of his best, if not his best season in the league.
In terms of like resource allocation, like you just said, like would you and because it's a little bit redundant because run defense, is he going to be on the field? Him versus JJ versus JFM, all plus run defenders, and then which one of them is going to be on the bench, or which 2 of those guys are going to be on the bench? Because you're assuming McDonald's going to play on 3rd down, so then you're going to have JFM and JJ on the bench on 3rd downs. So is it a little bit too much? Like I think at that point, I'm not going to say Clowney would be a terrible sign. Like I actually like the player individually. I think he would add a lot to the team. But at that point, would you rather sign, I don't know who's out there, but more of a pass rush specialist to maybe supplement your group and you kind of just maybe dump Clemens. And then you take that extra, let's say that guy costs, I don't know, $5 million, $6 million for that just edge rusher, 20%, 25% rep guy, and then add a safety in this booming safety market, or not a booming safety market, this actually very buyer-friendly safety market. So if they were going to add a DN, I would much prefer it to be that type of deal where it's like, okay, just a specific, speed rusher type of guy. And then maybe you splurge at defensive line, safety, or maybe even defensive line. Like right now, we'll talk about it, we have Kinlaw, we have Solomon Thomas. We don't have anybody on the team who I feel as comfortable with as I felt with Jefferson. You still have Calais Campbell out there. The Jets were interested in him last year. He was pretty good with the Falcons last year, to my knowledge. So do you see them making a splash on defense, maybe in the defensive line at D tackle? And then again, we'll kind of trickle that into talking about the guys we signed. But do you think Calais Campbell is possible, or anybody else on the defensive line? And then I want to transition to safety after that.
In terms of the defensive tackles, I feel like they're done with this rotation.
Yeah.
And on that, but they signed Fotu to play the Woods role. They brought Thomas back, and I guess Kinlaw Jefferson replacement. So I don't know. It feels like they're done with the D tackles. Clowney's just interesting. I mean, it doesn't feel like a total necessity to get a player of his caliber and likely cost. But they do, Huff did leave and they haven't replaced him. So there is a hole there in terms of another body that you need. But I think you could see, if they don't get Clowney, something like more of a speed rush or, pass rush specialist type. I mean, I'm looking at some of the names here. Yannick Ngakoue is out there, Romeo Okora. These are just a couple guys who I know are like pass rush types. So I think you could see that if they don't get Clowney. So yeah, we'll see what happens. But how about Kinlaw? Do we want to get in on that elephant in the room?
Yeah,
the one thing that I think you and I agree is probably their worst move so far.
So that's the problem right now. Like, we'll talk about the rest of the roster and stuff, but the Jets as of right now are downgraded on the interior defensive line. Right, I like Quentin Jefferson much more than Kinlaw, much more than Fotu. I like Al Woods more than Fotu, just specifically for their roles. So Kinlaw, I was okay with the signing, but I thought Kinlaw was the 1-for-1 Solomon Thomas replacement. The high first-round pick, athletic ability, right. Take a flyer on him. 25, 26 years old. Okay, I'm okay with that. But you come out and you see $7.25 million, which I think Rivka or you highlighted in the chat was like, that was more than Al Woods and Quentin Jefferson both made combined last year. So Kinlaw is apparently going to be, at least as of right now, going to be the starter for $7.25 million. I was not impressed with the film. Overall, I think he's very erratic. I think he rushes high. I think he has little to no rush plan. So he gets moved in the run game a lot. I'll just be transparent. Like, there are some exciting plays because of his physical upside. But past that, he's a very just inconsistent player who I do not want to rely on to be a starter. I don't know if you're having a problem with audio, Nani, but he looks like you're swimming a little bit there with the audio.
I was messing around with the headphones a little bit. I just came back. I heard a little bit of what you said.
Okay, yeah, I basically said that Kinlaw is overpaid and he is very inconsistent on film, and I went into some more specifics about why he's inconsistent. Mostly hand usage, not a real plan, very inconsistent with his leverage. I'm just not a big fan of the player, overall, just being transparent. And then past that, Solomon Thomas, bringing him back. Right now, if you just say, hey, one play, regardless of what it is, would you want Solomon Thomas or Kinlaw? I'm banking on Solomon Thomas right now. I don't know if you would agree with that, but I think Solomon Thomas is the better player as of right now. So that should tell you something about Kinlaw. And then past that, the run stuffing guy that they Leaky Fotu instead of Al Woods. Al Woods, I watched him and I was pretty excited how he just dominated people on the field. Fotu, I don't know what he's really like plus at. For 330, he gets moved a lot. He plays high. He doesn't know how to anchor down very well. I don't think his awareness is very good. So, again, transparency. I like some of the moves they made. I like the trade. I like the Simpson move. I like Tyrod, which we'll talk about. Their interior defensive line moves were very underwhelming to me. That's why they're like right now, again, very early grade, but I'm more like a B-, maybe like a high C+, but probably we'll be more positive. We'll say B-. And a big part of that is probably either paying double or triple what Kinlaw is worth. And then Fotu was a guy, again, I'm early. I'm only 3-4 games into Fotu, but I was not overwhelmed with his film at all.
Yeah, and Kinlaw, when they announced it at first, I was okay with it, and I liked it because I had mentioned him recently as someone they could bring in terms of players they were connected to. But exactly as you said, I was projecting like, okay, he's probably going to replace Solomon Thomas, be the third guy, maybe even fourth. in this rotation. Then you see the contract, Quentin Jefferson leaves, and I'm curious to see the contract on that. It hasn't come out yet, but yeah, he is massively overpaid, and there's really no way around that. This is a guy who for 3 years barely played, and when he did play, I think he had 1.5 sacks in like 25
And he was injury
games.
prone, right? In the first 3 years?
Yeah. He missed like half his games. And then even when he did play, just didn't have the production. And he had a good year last year. He finally stayed healthy. He improved. He was a decent rotational pass rusher for them. So I thought, in the same kind of role, it would be okay. But to put him in the Quentin Jefferson role, again, maybe Quentin Jefferson got a huge contract and it's cheaper. But even if he didn't, I think there were better ways to use that money than on him.
Now,
again, like he's a Solomon Thomas caliber. Like you said, you would take him over or Thomas over Kinlaw. So he's going to be a downgrade compared to Quentin Jefferson.
Now, with that being said, is he worth like $4 million potentially just to tell Samini that he has bigger balls than Samini? I don't know if you saw the video of Kinlaw getting interviewed, but like the guy was like questioning his play. He's like, well, I got bigger balls than you or something like that. So maybe that's worth it in itself. But 25 games in the first 3 years. Last year he was okay. Again, I'm like 4 or 5 games through. I'm not super impressed. I would have much rather the group they had last year. So their interior defensive line additions were quite underwhelming. We'll move back to the chat just after this quickly because we talked about interior defensive line. We talked about defensive ends a little bit. The safety market right now it's a buyer's market. I know that we have Tony Adams. We re-signed Chuck Clark, which I don't know if I hit on that. I'm a huge fan of Nania. That was one guy in the Slack and on Twitter. Relative to his price, I was super, super excited about Chuck Clark, and now you bring him back. I think he could easily be a solid starting strong safety, if not a very, very good reserve who can play that nickel backer type role that we talked about a lot last year, if you've been listening to the show for a while. So either way, whether it be depth, nickel linebacker or starting strong safety, I really like him. But with that being said, again, you do want to take advantage of the market. And if you had to pay, a safety, their regular value, then okay, I get maybe not going towards that direction. But with that being said, it seems like a lot of guys are getting contracts under what you'd think they'd get. Poyer got like $2-3 million from the Dolphins. Cam Curl just got like $7 million-ish from the Commanders, and he's a pretty good player. I think Jeremy Chin got a relatively affordable contract. So it seems like it's a buyer's market. So do you consider taking some of the money the Jets have right now? Again, they can make moves. Zach Wilson trade $5 million. Lazard trade, again, I'll drive him wherever he's going, can free up some. Mosley just took a pay cut. I think I saved up like $12 million. So in a buyer's market, do you take advantage of the safety market and get a guy in here?
It's something you can consider, but I'm with you. I really like the Chuck Clark re-signing. I think going in, that was one of my top priority re-signings that I wanted to see, because I think we both thought he was going to start last year, and based on what we both expected, we probably thought he would have been better than what Jordan Whitehead ended up doing. Regardless of whatever talk he might put out there, I think he was not very good last year. He gave the most touchdowns among safeties and was tied for the most missed tackles. So
I was just watching
Tyrod
and he broke Whitehead's ankles. So
I think like Chuck Clark is not a flashy guy. I don't think he's going to get many interceptions. He could even finish a whole season without one. But in those two categories I just mentioned, I think he's a guy who is just going to fulfill his role and not make as many of those mistakes. So I think Clark, as long as he's healthy, is going to end up being the starter next to Tony Adams. I would like to see Ashton Davis resign to play the role he played last year. Maybe he gets an outside shot to compete to start. In terms of, Clark is coming back off his injury. Maybe you say there's competition, give Davis a shot. So I'd still like to see that. I don't know. I don't think I feel the need for them to, spend more than they have to on the safety position.
Yeah, I could see. I would see it maybe even be more of like a depth. Like it doesn't even have to be like a bigger free agent, like and I know Chauncey Gardner Johnson's gone or something like that. But even maybe like a depth guy who could be a really good backup to Chuck Clark. Like you have Quandre Diggs out there, you have Hyde, you have Marcus May out there. Like there are still some names that could be, some decent, adds to this group. Rodney McLeod is a guy I know we wanted last year. Maybe could he be a depth guy? Take Ashton or a guy like Tony Adams under his wing. I don't know, but possibility. So let's get back into the chat because I am always behind it a ridiculous amount. But while we talk about that, or while I go through the chat, next move we've made, Tyrod Taylor. It's just funny because I think it's 2 years, $18 million, but a decent chunk of that is incentives, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know if the actual terms of the incentives came out with Tyrod. I like him a lot, man. Like watching what I did. I watched his first, I think I watched like 4 games. I watched up to the Jets game. He got injured at the Jets game. He's absurdly good deep ball thrower. I didn't realize how good of a deep ball thrower he is, but it's just funny that now he's our backup, but you take a healthy Tyrod, and obviously that's a big question, because of he's battled some injuries in the past few years, and part of that is, I don't know if you watched him, but he was running for his life a lot of the time with the Giants last year. But he's our best quarterback we've had since what? Minus Aaron Rodgers, obviously, but minus Rodgers, he's the best quarterback we've had since Brett Favre. Like legitimately, like if you're talking about Tyrod Taylor in 2015, what he was for the Bills at that point, I'm taking Tyrod over Fitzpatrick. I think he's probably a better player than him. So we haven't had a quarterback in so long that now our backup is the best player we've had at quarterback minus Aaron Rodgers in the last 15 years. So it does feel nice. I always thought that the Brissett's, like when I was doing the stream last week and I was going through the simulator, I thought that Brissett and Minshew might price themselves out. Like they were probably the upper tier of what you want for backups. Like it's probably a little bit too much for the Jets. And I kind of landed on Tyrod last week. I was like, I think this is the guy that they should sign. Maybe got even a little bit more money than we expected, but you're talking about what? I don't know how to quantify it, a top 5 to 10 backup in the league easily. Probably, and the Jets have never really had that. So I'm thrilled with the Tyron signing. I'll be honest.
Yeah, when I saw the news of this, I loved it. There's a small collection of guys, probably him, Brissett, and Minshew, that they could have signed where I'd be like, okay, that's about as good as you can realistically hope for from a backup. I was expecting Tannehill because of the connections, which, isn't terrible for a backup, but he had a really bad season last year. Seems to be declining. But, Tyrod, he vastly outplayed the other 2 quarterbacks on the Giants last year in that same terrible scheme or, just overall situation with the offensive line and everything. And you mentioned his deep ball. Like, that's always been a fascinating thing to me with him because, like, even going back to those Bills years, especially in 2015, he would occasionally hit these pretty deep shots with just so much arc, or they drop right in, but he just doesn't do it a lot. He's always kind of been a safe quarterback. His interceptions have always been really low, pretty risk averse, and he'll take scrambles, doesn't really take the most aggressive shots. Which I think you like for a backup. He's not turnover prone. For his career, he's only thrown a pick on 1.7% of his passes, which is very, very low. So you like that in a backup quarterback. But occasionally he can pull out that deep ball. So that's a really nice plus to have on top of that.
Deep ball, he's safe. The athleticism. There are some times where I want him to put like more heat on balls, where he lost it in situations where I want him to kind of put more oomph into the ball. But overall, really safe. Again, we'll take a sack or 2, might stare a guy down, but overall, I think he gets through his reads pretty smoothly. Not afraid to take the check down. So I'm happy with him. Again, I plug in Tyrod last year, healthy Tyrod. Did the Jets win another 2-3 games last year? Probably. Realistically, they in my opinion, they do. So I'm definitely happy with it. I'll never I get the people who say, oh, well, if Rodgers goes down, then we're screwed anyway. Yes. If he goes down for the playoffs, yes, we're screwed. But you may need Tyrod to come in for a half and win a game for the division. Right. So no, I'm definitely thrilled with that. I'm going to start flying through the chat, but this ties into another one of my topics. But so far in free agency, what do you think? Has it impacted your thoughts on the Jets at 10? Where do you think they're going as of right now? Because they can really go tackle or receiver at this point. But I think we're both expecting the Jets to do something at receiver. But with that being said, what are your general thoughts on what they want or what they need at 10? We have Ness here who says he wants Latham but fears Bowers at 10. So where is your line of thinking? I haven't podcasted with you in a little bit, so I'm not even sure if kind of what your feel is on the top 10.
Yeah, it still feels like we're waiting for one more domino to kind of push us in a certain direction. But I feel like maybe the receiver odds have gone up a little bit considering, they filled 2 O-line spots. There's still plenty of opportunities for them to fill another one and decrease their desperation to draft a tackle that they may previously had. So maybe receiver odds have gone up a little bit, but the thing I keep coming back to with Rodgers is that 22 season and the rookie receivers. I feel like he's going to want experience at the receiver spots, and he would rather have a rookie tackle than receiver. Maybe not, but that's just kind of the if I were to pick either way, I would think that's what he would prefer. And we know he has a lot of input in the decisions. So I still feel like they're going to end up taking a tackle. And then free agency, they'll get Bakhtiari, maybe another, high-level backup, something like that, to hold the fort down and then address it later. I still feel like that's what they'll do. But the receiver odds are increasing a little bit, as we, still sit here and they haven't addressed it. And it's a really good receiver class. In terms of the prospects, I do have to start getting into them more. And I think now that free agency is kind of, getting past, I'm going to start really focusing on the prospects more. So I don't want to comment on any of them too much specifically and pretend I know about them when I don't. But those are my thoughts on, how it's shaping out.
Yeah, and with the receiver again, I'm concerned that you're going to get receiver 4 because Arizona, in my opinion, is locked to take Harrison Jr. unless something else happens in trade or something like that. The Chargers don't have a receiver really. The Giants don't have a receiver really. So you think Tennessee probably takes a offensive lineman. Chicago now has Keenan Allen and DJ Moore, but I think that there might be do 3 receivers go? Arizona, Chargers, Giants. That's the question. It's possible. And with that being said, again, I don't necessarily think Odunze is some slam dunk prospect at 10. I like him. I do not love him. I could tell you that I would have had Drake London above him. I would have had Garrett Wilson above him. So I'm not in love with the prospect. I personally, and I said this on Twitter, kind of joking a little bit, but I said, basically F it, get Tyron Smith and trade up for Neighbors. I like Neighbors significantly more than Odunze. So if he were falling a couple of picks, would that be something the Jets would consider? Again, like maybe that's the splash move we're looking at, Nania. It's like, hey, it's not necessarily in free agency, but they fill a lot of their holes and they feel they have the gumption to trade up for a Neighbor. Right. So I think it's a really, really good prospect. But right now I am leaning towards the Jets. Probably getting Bakhtiari, probably getting like a Boyd or a combination of like a Reynolds and OBJ, which wouldn't be over, really inspiring. But I think they probably are still leaning towards tackle at 10. Now, in terms of those guys, I know you said you haven't watched a lot. I have 7 reviews cooking of the 4 big tackles, Bowers, and then Odunze and Neighbors. They're all coming, within the next few weeks. I'll get them all out before the draft. So you guys should go and watch them once they're out. But in terms of the tackles at 10, if it were to be one of those guys, do you have preferences? Any thoughts on the 4 tackles?
I still want to watch them more, but I know a lot of what I know right now is based on your discussions and some of the things that you've posted. And I know I saw you saying that Latham, maybe with the recent, the additions that they made, potentially signaling a scheme change, that he could be the best fit for that. So, I mean, I'll look at the consensus mock draft right now in the mock draft database. And when they have the Jets coming up, it's Fashanu and Alt are gone. The top 3 receivers are gone. So it's Fuaga and you have Latham. So you're saying in that situation you would lean towards Latham?
10 times out of 10. Yeah, it's I don't think it's very, very close. With Fuaga, I just think he's a better guard, man. He didn't have to take like a lot of true pass sets where I had to see him survive on an island a ton. And with that being said, I don't like the lateral mobility of him. I don't like his like redirect movement ability. Like once he's knocked off his spot, I don't love it. And then I think in terms of and there was even some reps at the Senior Bowl where like people are like, oh yeah, this is a really good rep. I'm like, yeah, if a quarterback was there though, the quarterback had to step up or back because he just let, or Fuaga just allowed this pressure. His outside hand carriage is very, very low and wide. He shoots from low and wide. I don't think it's as good a shot as it works with him as tackle as it does with guard. So I just think he's a better guard, and I'm a little bit worried with him on an island. So in my mind, Latham is the better prospect. To me, he's OT2. I might even, after I do the reviews, after I record them, might move up to 1. Which sounds crazy, but I think people think it's crazy because they consistently see just kind of regurgitated nonsense in terms of their mock drafts. And, when everybody has Alt at 1, do you want to be that guy to go opposite of the grain and say, Alt might not be number 1, which I'm a little bit more in that line of thinking. And I think Alt is probably still is number 1, but Alt, some kind of talk came out this week, Jets, maybe they trade up and all this stuff. Alt is not a guy to trade up for. Alt might be OT1. If you trade up for Alt, I think it's a mistake. I don't think there's that big of a gap between, him and Latham or even, Fashanu to be worthwhile to trade or for a trade. So I'm leaning towards Latham being the fit. I think he could play left tackle and he would fit the road grading offensive line they have now. You know, you have Latham pulling Moses. Like Latham, when you watch him, Nania, he is nasty, like nasty to a detriment at some point. So you get him with Moses, who lays guys out, with Simpson, who does it. And by the way, with Simpson too, some of the holding things, I did want to mention this. People say Lamar Jackson helps in terms of the sacks. The things you have to consider with Lamar Jackson also, while he may help with the sacks in some aspects, he also may run into sacks, which may hurt. And then with that being said, because Lamar Jackson hold on to the ball and scrambles, in terms of the holds, I want to watch more of them individually. The one hold I saw so far in the first 5 or 6 weeks was because Lamar Jackson held the ball for 4 seconds, and then Simpson didn't know where he was, and then he started to scramble, and that's why he held the guy. So he can actually really, really hurt you in terms of holding calls. So I want to see exactly where they came from. But yeah, Latham right now, sign the dotted line for me at 10. I would absolutely love that pick if they were to go there. And I'll show why in the review. I know some people are like, "Oh my God, you don't love Alt." Yeah, there's some flaws with Alt. I think he's going to have some serious problems, at least in year 1 versus power. Just the way he anchors and the high waistedness of his body, the lack of like bulk from his lower half. So you have both technical issues and actual power issues just because of how big he is. He's going to struggle a little bit with power. So I don't think he's a guy you trade up for, but nonetheless, he still might be tackle 2 or tackle 1 or 2 for me. Let's keep moving through the chat. Harold says Bakhtiari is not coming to be a backup man. As a 5 times All-Pro, he will at least want to compete for the job. I don't think he signs a dotted line for backup right now. But if the Jets say, like, what would you be happy with Bakhtiari in terms of the contract? Because he's still a really good player when he's healthy, right? Like I was thinking, I think I just threw it out there. Like somebody had said it at work. We're talking about like contracts and all that stuff. Like Bakhtiari, $5 million a year. $500,000 roster bonus for every game that he's active, like something like that, because it has to be heavily incentive based. And he can come in and, hey, Bach, you come in, you compete for that starting spot. You know, we're going to tell you that you could sign here, but it doesn't prohibit us from drafting a guy at 10. If he beats you out, he beats you out. But I think Bakhtiari is smart enough to recognize that, hey, I've played 20 games in the last 3 years, whatever it's been. I can't necessarily be relied on. So I don't think he necessarily has like the status to be like, oh, you better not draft anybody then if I come in, you know? Yeah. So if they were to bring him in, which seems somewhat inevitable at this point, $4 or $5 million base with like $500,000 to $750,000 roster bonus for every game, because if he plays 17 games, he may be worth, he may as well be worth $20 million. But you cannot guarantee that. So I think it has to be heavily incentives based with, again, heavily incentive based with a base of, again, $4 or $5 million, something like that.
Yeah, I'm totally with you on that. I think a low number, incentives based in terms of games played. And I think, like, I don't want to say I'm high on Bakhtiari, but I think a lot of people just immediately write it off because of the injuries. Yeah. And that's totally justified. He's played 13 games the last 3 years, 5 knee surgeries. Okay. Yeah. It's rough, but this is still a guy who's probably the best left tackle of the past decade, especially in pass blocking. And I think what's important to keep in mind is that even with all these injuries, and he's had a lot of them, when he has been out there, he's still played really well. It hasn't affected him yet, and it could. Maybe this is where it all falls off for him. But he played a game this year. He was dominant. When he played in 2022, he was dominant. So he's still been great in spite of that. And for an elite offensive lineman, he's 32 right now. He'll be 33 in September. That's not that old. We've seen a lot. Guys at this level tend to go further than that. When you talk about like your Jason Peters and Andrew Whitworths, things like that, especially a guy with, Bakhtiari's caliber, he isn't that old quite yet. So there's a lot of upside, is all I'm saying. Obviously, you don't want to guarantee him too much. You don't want to go into the season with him as your only starting option. I think you couple him with drafting a tackle in the first round. Yeah, that's a good combination. You have to. But there's a lot of upside, is all I'm saying. So there is a very exciting ceiling with him.
And with him, like, let's say you were to sign him and then something happens in the draft, you trade up for Neighbors. Like, he's not a guy who I even want necessarily backed up by like a 3rd round rookie. Like, if he were to sign here, you need to swing a trade for, let's say, like a Kelvin Beachum. I think he might be on the Cardinals. So, but like, send like a 6th round pick for a guy who's a good swing tackle. Like, you need something with him as an insurance policy. But when he's healthy, he's still good. But my thing is, like, didn't he like shit on the MetLife field. Not literally. He did not literally go there and pull his pants down and shit, but like he was criticizing the turf. And then wasn't there another game where he like criticized the turf and like refused to play or something like that? So would he go from actively, dumping on the field and refusing to play a game in a dome? I don't know if it was like, whatever it was, Falcons or whatever game it was, to go now you're going to play 8-9 games on that turf a year. So how does that work with Bach though? That's kind of a conundrum.
Yeah. I mean, he doesn't have to play a lot of road games on them, and it's not like he has a lot of options. Or no. I mean, maybe he will. I don't know, but it's something to keep in mind for sure.
We've converted Dano. He said he was here because of Daniel Murphy. Now he's telling people to smash the like button. So we appreciate you, Dano. We'll keep moving on. JFM is our cheaper Reek Armstead. Me personally, I would have personally got rid of JFM, traded him, and then used that money to re-sign Huff. Because I think pass rush is the more important trait, and I think JFM is just an okay pass rusher at this point. But nonetheless, he's still on the team. But maybe they could convert some of his salary too. I know you can get rid of some money by converting him or extending him. DJ Reed, Zach Wilson. If you get rid of Lazard again for a bag of potato chips, I would take that. I think they save a decent amount of money if they trade him like with a post for June 1st designation. But let's see, which left offensive tackle in the draft could best fit into our new blocking scheme other than Alt. Alt is not the best fit for that blocking scheme. Alt is better in zone. And again, I have an issue with Alt in terms of how high-waisted he is and the lack of power he has. I think Latham in a power block, maybe I'll just say it. I'll just be true to myself. Right now, if they are moving towards a power blocking scheme, duo scheme, Latham or Alt at 10, I think I take Latham. That sounds crazy to people, but it's true. It's true in my mind. It just is. And I think people tend to just go with the flow on that one, but I would feel better. I'd be like, damn, I really, really like that fit. I don't know why Alt is hyped up as much as he is. Again, maybe my favorite overall player. With this scheme, I think I'm leaning towards Latham at this point, which is kind of crazy to come out of my mouth, but nonetheless. Giants are rumored to be taking McCarthy, but if Minnesota jumps them, they'll probably take Neighbors. I would be willing to trade up for Neighbors. Nania, again, once you watch him, you may agree. I don't know if you're going to watch my review or just watch him by yourself, but you're going to agree, I think. Sneakers and Boots has Phil Jody still swinging it when it comes to trades. Glad to see Moses back. That's probably the best move, right? At this point, Moses, Tyrod, and the special teams aces coming back.
Yeah, I mean, Moses, just the value of getting him, I think is very impressive. So I would put Moses probably number one. I know I said Simpson earlier, but maybe Moses in terms of just he's more proven. I'd like that move too.
Yeah. Now, Dakota says any offensive tackle, Romo Dunze or Brock Bowers at 10. I would be like Romo Dunze if we didn't have a number 2 receiver, be like a fine like B move to me. Just a B. Like I'm okay with the player. Brock Bowers, I would not love it. I've highlighted why in recent weeks. I don't know how you feel about Bowers, and I'm not the highest on him. I think he's kind of a one-trick pony in terms of yak right now. But yeah, to me, this offseason is currently at a B- at best. Yeah, I'm saying B- to be more positive. C+, B-. Adding a legit receiver could really change that grade for me, though. Let's see. Joe, have you looked at any more tape on Latham? Is he a possibility? He should be a possibility. I've watched every single game of his 2023 season, minus the second to last one, which I'm going to watch before I do the review. But yeah, I reviewed his entire season. Again, OT2 overall for the Jets, more power scheme that I think they're going to. I think he's OT1 for me at this point. So I like him a lot. Let's keep going on. Where's the home run all-in move possibilities of a swing at Ayuk, Metcalf, Adams, Jefferson? Jefferson was like a stupid Dov Kleiman rumor, right? That you highlighted. It was like based on some bullshit, article or something like that. Adams, I don't think he's going to get traded. Metcalf, I don't know. Ayuk, the problem with Ayuk is like I like the player, but do you like the player to the point where you trade a first-round pick and pay him $25 million a year? I don't know. But we kind of talked about this before. Is there anything else you want to add in terms of like a big fish free agent or move at receiver? I don't really know who else is. I don't really know who else is out there.
Who to throw in there. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Let's throw the irrational stuff away. We have plenty of rational takes to bounce. Bach for 10. Come on. I don't know who you're. I don't know if that's somebody else, but Rusty Spooner, what is up, my man? Rivka says, I don't think CD is that hot of a commodity because he was out for a year. He was out of the league for a year. Guys like that often struggle. Yeah, you'd say he's going to be pretty rusty, but I'm fairly confident in him coming back and bouncing back to his form. Hawk says we get Bakhtiari and back him up with Donovan Smith on a cheap deal, get Mike Williams for 2 years, 16 mil. Then it's a B-. Oh, if we do all of that stuff, it's a B-. If we were to get if that is the combo, Nania, Bakhtiari, and Donovan Smith, because Donovan Smith is a Brooklyn native, I believe, and he said that he would love to play with Aaron Rodgers. Now, Donovan Smith, let's get him like individually, because could it be Bakhtiari and Smith? I see that as a possibility. Or could it just be, let's say Bakhtiari doesn't want to play here, he wants too much money. Do you think that Donovan Smith is like one of the lesser options that we wouldn't be thrilled with, but if he is your worst case scenario at left tackle with a guy developing behind him, like how bad would Donovan Smith be as our starting left tackle?
I don't know. I don't think I'm in on that one. I think he's someone who's a name because he's been on 2 Super Bowl teams, but he was pretty awful this past. Even going into this past year, he was already valued low enough. I think he only signed for like $2 million on 1 year with KC. And then he was one of the worst tackles in terms of most stats. And then in the Super Bowl, I know he gave up at least 1 sack. I think he's pretty bad, to be honest. Based on everything I've seen at this point of his career, I don't think I would want him starting. It sounds like another Dwayne Brown situation.
So he's more of like a swing backup. Like you'd be okay with him as a swing backup, but not
as a backup. I'm fine with that, just based on experience. But
so if they were going to draft right now, they draft Latham or whoever at 10, and then they bring in Donovan Smith. Do you think that's a good plan for the offensive line?
I think that's decent. Yeah,
decent.
Another move I would look for backups. I don't know. I just don't know how much higher you go in terms of backups. Like I don't want to act like my backup expectations are too high, especially a tackle, because if you're a backup, you can't be that great. So you do have to keep your expectations in check. So I'd be okay with him as a backup, but I don't want him starting.
You know what I really want as a backup is Connor McGovern. If he can come back for $1.9 million, I think that's a slam dunk of a move as a backup. Simon says what I like about this stream is everyone becomes more conservative, which made me laugh. Hawk, do you think the Jets look they're going to rush to pay for Tyron Smith? Is a big fish who's still out there. Like that's a big domino to fall in the tackle market, right? Because past that, there's not really a lot of like awe-inspiring names. Him and Boyd. Past Boyd, like what are the other options you like past Boyd? Because we talk about Boyd a lot. You're a guy who I think I've seen you be maybe a little bit more favorable to what Odell Beckham could be for the Jets as like a receiver 3. But past Boyd, if they weren't to land him, do you like who are the next 2 to 3 to 4 guys who maybe could make as like solid receiver 3s, or at least like good enough where maybe receiver's not a forced pick at 10?
Yeah, I do like OBJ if the price is right. I think last year, he showed that he was probably overpaid for the $15 million that they gave him. But at the same time, I think he was still a really good deep threat. He was efficient when they targeted him, made a lot of big plays for them in key spots. I think his separation was still pretty good. He still has injury issues. That's a part of it. So I wouldn't overpay him, obviously. But, if you're looking at a receiver 3, complimentary, I think big play threat, I think he could still be a good fit for that. So I like him if he can come for like 7-8 million, something like that. On top of that, Josh Reynolds is a guy who I've been keying in on. I'm pretty sure he hasn't signed yet. No, he hasn't. Reynolds has been a really good receiver 3 with the Lions the past couple of years. Just he doesn't get targeted a lot, but he always comes through. When he does get targeted, his efficiency has been great. He's got really good size, good contested catch guy down the field. Pretty solid with yak too. He's to me just like the perfect role player because he doesn't get targeted a lot. He's not a great separator or anything like that. So he's never going to put up huge numbers, but for the Lions, he's been a big part of what they've done because he's so efficient when they target him. And that's when I look at the Lions offense, that's one of the best parts about that offense is they don't have a second superstar receiver. Obviously, they had Laporta this year at tight end, but the gap at receiver is pretty big. But collectively, all those guys outside of St. Brown, they had Khalif Raymond, they have Josh Reynolds, and first-round pick Jameson Williams. All those guys, none of them did too much on their own, but collectively, the efficiency was really, really good. So I think the Jets, ideally, if you don't get a Mike Williams, a big fish, I think that's what you want to kind of replicate, is to have multiple solid guys who can all, they bring to the table their specific skill sets and they execute in their roles. And I think Josh Reynolds, OBJ, guys like that, even Tyler Boyd out of the slot, probably more expensive than some of those other ones, I think are some guys who can do that for you.
So Dano says, he wants to know our thoughts on the mere 70 snaps that Izzy earned late last season, sans AVT. How'd he look? I don't want this to be a cop out, Dano, but he's such like an explosive boom or bust guy that putting him behind a bad offensive line where he's contacted pretty much immediately does not take advantage of what he is at all. And same thing for Breece. Like there are some running backs who will get you like 2 yards in a cloud of dust. Nick Chubb, like really efficient. But Breece Hall is a guy who like bounces runs and will get a yard 70, like not the consistent 3, 4, 5 yard guy. Same thing with Izzy. So Izzy, I don't think it was really fair to evaluate his game last year, but he's still a massive question mark. And that's one of the more like secondary needs for the Jets right now. You need a depth safety. You need potentially a tight end 2, a tight end, or at least tight end 3 in my mind. You need a running back 2. I am of the mindset to draft the running back every single year because of how many hits. So draft a guy in the 5th, 6th, 7th round, whatever it may be, maybe even the 4th. But let's say they draft a guy in those rounds, whatever, you don't want to rely on him. Running back 2, are you okay with it being Izzy? Me, I'm personally not. So to follow that up, who were some guys in free agency who you think could fit with the Jets as that running back 2?
Yeah, not okay with it currently. He could earn it, but I think at this moment, I didn't see enough. And like you said, really bad offensive line, which hurts anyone, but especially his style of running. So I'm not bearing him yet, but he also didn't show enough to be, I think, complacent with just him as the RB2. But I mean, there's some decent guys out there. One guy I brought up was Damian Harris because going off of the scheme thing we've been talking about, he played with the Pats a few years in a scheme that I think the Jets could end up looking similar to. And that's the thing. Like, I don't think they're going to, if they do make this change, I don't think they're going to look exactly like Baltimore specifically, because like there's a lot of things in that offense that no other team can do, especially not the Jets, without Lamar Jackson. But they could still be like a power-based team, and that's what the Pats have basically been. And Damian Harris was good there. He went to the Bills last year, and they run a similar thing. So he's been a guy who's been in a few of those offenses. Looking at the names here, I mean, there are a lot of guys in here who have gotten carries, and like you've heard of them, but I just don't know how much they've left in the tank. Like if Ezekiel Elliott is out here,
like Kareem Hunt,
Boston Scott, J.K. Dobbins, Kareem Hunt, Latavius Murray, Jerick McKinnon, Marlon Mack. Yeah. So, I mean, there are names out there, but I definitely would just like to get some veteran in there to have security.
Andrew Yale asked, what do you guys think of Clowney? I'll wrap up at least my thoughts. I think Nania and I is pretty much on the same page. I think we both like the player individually. It's about resource allocation. Is that too much to the defensive line? Mostly because it's kind of redundant, in terms of JJ, Clowney, and JFM are all kind of run defender first, pass rush second type of guys. So who do you take off in run plays? So I rather save the money personally, allocate that to the offense, or maybe even like safety or something like that. Now, if it's a thing where, okay, just in a vacuum, him or nobody else, okay, yeah, sure, sign him. But I'd almost rather, take $5 million, sign a guy like a depth guy who's a speed rusher, or just a rush specialist, and then use that $5, $6, $7, $8 million extra on, hey, landing Tyler Boyd or whoever it may be, So I think it's a little bit redundant. I like the player though individually. Like I'm not gonna be mad if he's brought in, right? So Ridley overrated. He got paid a lot. Clowney in New York. The thing with Clowney is, and you're hoping this doesn't come into effect because the Jets will hopefully be in the playoff run. But he seems like a guy who's a little bit volatile in terms of personality, like low effort player on a bad team if it doesn't work out, but he'll be like a high effort player on a good team. So you have to be slightly concerned about that, even though I think there's enough defensive structure and guys in the locker room where they're not going to let him slip, but still sign Clowney. Yeah, Clowney. Yeah, again, I'm cool with it individually, but if you're talking about like Clowney versus Boyd, give me Boyd. Like we need receivers at this point. We legitimately do not have a receiver 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 I'm comfortable with right now, right? Like even Gibson, I'm not sounding the dial for Gibson being on this team next year. What did he do in the punt return game? How many balls did he fumble, Nania? It was at least 4, 5, 6, right? Like one in the Bills game, one in the Chiefs game, one in the Eagles game. Like he had at least 5 or 6 muffs.
Yeah,
I don't know if he lost all 5 or 6. 5 muffs. Okay, and how many of those were recovered? Like 2 or 3? Okay. Yeah, Fashanu, the Jets are clowns.
But yeah, I agree. Like Gibson, I don't even think Gibson is guaranteed on the roster, and yet he's probably more reliable than Lazard based on the way they played last year. So I mean, receivers really really shaky outside of Garrett Wilson.
Wild Wave says Malik Neighbors at 10, and then Rivka says Neighbors will be off the board by 7. Yeah, I don't see Neighbors getting past 7. I just don't. He's good enough where he deserves. Like, he's legitimately a guy who in other drafts he goes number 1 in terms of the receiver, like receiver 1 in many other drafts. Odunze is up to snuff with like the Garrett Wilsons and Drake Londons of the world a couple of years ago, but he would, out of those 2 I mentioned, he would be 3. So I'm not in love with Odunze, and I've seen some guys I respect say that he has a lot of releases off the line. Nani, you will watch him. I suck at chart. I don't suck at charting. Maybe it's just a laziness thing, and maybe the fact that this is not my full-time job and I have a kid. But nonetheless, I almost want to like chart how many times he beat press coverage, and I don't know how you quantify that. But he rarely, if ever, beat press coverage in college, which is why he has so many highlight plays in terms of contested catches. But if there is one trait or one thing with receivers that are typically indicators of bust, it's the guys who have to rely on a lot of contested catches. Even though, with that being said, Odunze is probably the best contested catch guy I've ever watched in terms of college prospects. His contested catch ability is stupid good. With that being said, that's versus college guys, and that's definitely a red flag in terms of, okay, you don't create separation. So, yeah, I prefer Neighbors. And we'll see what Nania thinks after that. Boyd and CD, I'm cool with that plan. I'm definitely cool with that plan. Neighbors for president. Michael Thomas is better than Lazard, even when he's hurt and not playing. He is super. That's a super risky signing, right? With like how volatile he is, both on the field, injuries, personality. I'm pretty lukewarm on Michael Thomas.
Yeah, I'm not huge in that either. It's just, I mean, when was the last, has been 5 years since he was good. I just don't, I don't know if it's worth the risk.
Since we talked about tackle, we talked a little bit about receiver. I know, again, you're prefacing it, which I think is proper to say that you want to watch some of these guys more. Bowers on 10. Where are you in terms of that crowd?
I mean, I know Rivka did an article that was pretty descriptive on his overall profile. I've probably read more about him than any of the other guys just because of how controversial that would be for the Jets. I'm pretty firmly against it. And I know you've talked about him a lot too. I just haven't seen the evidence that he's special enough for the Jets to make what is definitely a luxury pick. I know people will try to say that, okay, this can be your number 2 weapon, regardless of whether he's a receiver or tight end. He can be that guy. I just don't, based on what I've seen, it doesn't seem like he's quite at that level to where I would bypass other needs to get that type of player. When you already have Tyler Conklin in place, and they have, more pressing needs at offensive line and receiver.
We have, do we think he visited the Bengals? He actively criticized the Jets coaching staff on social media twice after already not having the best social media presence, big busting. So I don't think the Jets love him. I don't think he's gonna be back. Corey Davis is a drop machine. That is fine if you think that. He is less of a drop machine than Alan Lazard. Alan Lazard is a 10 times worse drop machine, and he's our receiver 2 right now. So beggars cannot be choosers. I'm completely fine with Corey Davis as receiver 3. Again, I would sign the dotted line for right now. So,
agreed.
Let's see. Corey Davis I think he's better than people realize he is. That's a guy who I'm pretty often standing for, like how decent of a player he is. And again, I think a lot of the problem with Jets fans came in the fact that Zach Wilson got the ball down the field so infrequently that when Corey Davis did drop a ball, it was almost exemplified, but Corey Davis was like, he has a slightly higher drop percentage than average, but like, it's not brutal. I don't know if the averages and what Corey Davis's are, but yeah, it might be slightly, above average, but he's definitely not Alan Lazard in terms of hands. Alan Lazard's hands are brutally bad hands. So let's see. Boyd is fine, but I can't say I'd be enthused. No, he's not Mike Williams. He's not Deontay Johnson. He's not one of these guys, which still, if they land Boyd, like, I'm okay with it, but I'm still in the back of my mind, like, why didn't they get Deontay Johnson? Why didn't they get Keenan Allen? So fellas, awesome stream. Appreciate that, Andrew. We're going to keep running through the chat again. I apologize for not hitting every chat. It's just with so much news and Nania being on here, I just couldn't talk, or I couldn't hit the chat as much. Sleep ZZ Joe. Okay. Oh, we're talking about like Joe Douglas. I'm assuming like I was like me. Like, what are you talking about here? I was thinking like he's talking. Is that like a sleepy Joe Biden thing? Are we starting to get into the VP Aaron Rodgers stuff, which I'm not even going to hit on? The Sandy Hook stuff, like he's sharing conspiracy theories in group chats and whatever. It's like I'm not even going to try to get into it, dude. But like it's a glass house thing. Don't throw stones from a glass house. I think 99% of people, if our private chats and search histories and all this stuff were exposed, we'd all be quite embarrassed, or some of us would be in legitimate trouble. Like, let's just be real here. There's not one innocent soul in here who would be like, yeah, I'm cool with people just exposing my entire search history and text, because we'd all be fucked, right? And him sharing conspiracy theories is not him saying, I agree, it was all fake. It could just be like, hey, this is a really interesting one. Or it could be, hey, Nania, these people are fucking crazy. Look at this conspiracy theory. Like it wasn't labeled Aaron Rodgers believes that Sandy Park Elementary, the school shooting was staged or whatever. It was him sharing conspiracy theories. If we shared one, Nania, it could be labeled like that. If I shared one, I was like, hey, this one's really crazy. This guy's an idiot. It could be misconstrued of, oh, he shared it. Well, why did I share it? Because the guy, because it was an interesting one. Like whatever it is, it's just that was kind of crazy. But thoughts on our vice president, coming back and all of that stuff. So VP Rodgers, what are your quick thoughts on that one? I didn't really pay so much attention to it, but that would be so Jets, right? We get Rodgers, same thing as Vinny Testaverde, all this stuff. We hype ourselves up. Maybe we have a great offseason, and then he leaves to go on a presidential campaign as the VP, and then we never see Rodgers. Like that would be, at that point, I think we just got to switch teams, right? Like at that point, we're just going to run Ravens X, because that's fucking ridiculous.
You can't recover from that one. But I try not to pay attention to it too much. I just hope that it adds some fuel to his fire. I'm just going to look at it in that way. I know he was already motivated going into last year. Now he's got the Achilles. He's got plenty more criticism and drama. Hopefully he just takes all that and translates it to the field. That's what I'm going to choose to take away from it.
Yeah. I'm just hoping that would be the most Jets thing ever. I legitimately cannot handle that. I cannot handle that. Perfectly said, Nania. I don't know what exactly you said at 7:09, but you said it perfectly. So we appreciate that. Yeah, Clowney seems pretty people are either hot or cold on him. I'm fine with it. I just don't love I don't love the resource allocation for that one. Go get Tyron Smith, offense, defense. Okay, again, just running through this. One thing I will highlight, I guess, while I'm going through the chat and just finding some other interesting topics, the whole Hardman thing with Sauce. Sauce came out on the Pivot podcast, basically said that, and I'll do it really quickly because I don't know exactly everything he said, but he basically said he came in, was entitled, walked around like he was the guy who kind of won the Super Bowls for the Chiefs, even though he wasn't, was dropping punts in practice, air quotes, thought he had it made, never earned it. Sauce said he talked a lot. And then he, I guess, obviously that, he kind of insinuated that he was cursed out by Boyd for a reason, that he rubbed other players the wrong way. And then there was some insinuation that, like, I guess some girl that Hardman knows was like trying to talk shit about, or was like talking shit about Sauce on like some social media site. And Sauce basically approached Hardman about like, hey, this chick, like, could you get her to stop basically bashing my name? And Hardman was like, yeah, you got to pay her. Instead of being like, yeah, I'll handle it, bro. Like, you're my teammate. I got you, or something like that. He's like, no, you got to pay her. So Hardman seemingly just a bad guy who was entitled. And it seemed, and his interviews kind of matched that. It's like, he was happy just to catch the game-winning pass on a wide open, catch in the Super Bowl. He was on a Pivot podcast, which, again, good players go on that. He's not a good player. He's a Jag. Seemed happy to be on it, and then just started shitting on the Jets because he thinks he's holier than thou, and kind of evidenced by the fact that he's talking about, hey, it's, in our locker room, me and Kelsey and Mahomes and Andy Reid, like, we're on the same level with all the other guys. It's like, who the fuck are you, dude? Like, you don't do shit. So Hardman just confirmed bad guy. Is that what we learned by Sauce? And on top of that, he gives away game plans as well. So.
And that as well. I mean, I feel like it just kind of confirmed all of our suspicions. Even before all this came out, I think you could connect the dots based on how it was playing out while he was still with the Jets. I mean, it was just it really pointed to either a lack of playbook understanding or just not being a great guy overall for him to, and they talked him up in the offseason too. So that made it especially surprising when they just phased him out like that. But yeah, I mean, it's just surprising to me that I know he won the Super Bowl, and like you have the right to say whatever you want, I guess, but like it wasn't like he dominated the Super Bowl. I mean, Kadarius Toney made the same exact play in last year's Super Bowl, so it's literally the most replaceable play that a football player could make that he made to win the Super Bowl, and it's kind of backfired on him because now all this other stuff has come out that never would have come out if he just didn't do that. So I think he just kind of put it all on himself.
Some people are calling Joe Douglas Coupon Joe. We have Tony saying, I bet Joe puts water in empty ketchup bottles to get the last drop instead of spending $3 for a new bottle. And some people are criticizing him. And again, I C plus, B minus right now. I'm not thrilled with it. If he lands a receiver though, I'm okay with it. The interior defensive line moves are definitely never going to be a positive to me. But he has some wiggle room in terms of receiver, but with all the moves that went down, if he does not do something that's significant, again, I'm going to lose my shit. Nani, it is 8 o'clock. I don't know if you have like an extra 10, 15 minutes just to run through the rest of the chat and then we'll bounce out of here. Is that okay?
Yeah, I'm good to stick around.
Okay. Yeah. I'm just going to run through the rest of the chat and then unless, something else pops up, somebody else gets signed, which I think last year, was it 2 years ago? I think it was 2 years ago. JFM signed an extension live on stream, but hopefully we get somebody now.
I remember that.
Yeah, you specifically remember it because I screenshotted your face when I was breaking the news to you. Then that became a thing. Yeah, I'm hoping they can sign a Boyd or something like that. And again, it is still surprising that Tyron Smith is out there. It could be the Jets. It's just so concerning. With the Jets.
Did you see the Sauce tweet where he claimed that he has a receiver coming to visit next week?
Yeah, but is that going to be Odell Beckham? Because weren't they kind of connected last year? Like who else could it be? Because it was Odell last year, right?
I know there was a report that someone, I forget who it was, that reported that Jets players were trying to recruit Tyler Boyd a few days ago.
Garrett
which
Wilson,
I thought was weird because it's like, again, like we said, we're okay with Boyd, but like recruit Tyler Boyd.
Yeah.
Why aren't you recruiting the other guys?
Beggars can't be choosers. At this point, he's the best out there. What about Gallup from Dallas? He's been injured a lot, right? He hasn't been very productive. I would be like receiver 5. Okay, receiver 4, maybe, but that's about it. Like he's not receiver 2 or 3 to me anymore at this point in his career. Shot in the dark. Okay. Right. That's about it. Ryan, 12.
There's a lot of these guys with the receivers that I feel like have 1,000-yard season, like second year. And then that kind of just sticks with them forever. They haven't done any, like I'm looking at Gallup. He's had under 500 yards 3 years in a row, but it's just because he had that 1,000-yard season. 2019 that he's still like a recognizable name, but yeah, he's not a solution.
Let's keep seeing. Fashanu, did he have 9-inch hands? Mims 12-inch hands? Yeah, Fashanu was a guy who's a little bit overhyped to me too. And I don't mean to be a guy who's like everybody's overhyped. I think Bowers is. I think Odunze is. I'm higher on Neighbors. I'm higher on Latham. And John says it here. Latham's ceiling is unbelievable. It is, man. And he's a perfect fit if you're trying to build a nasty offensive line. So, I think right now, again, for the Jets, 10 considering their scheme, I think he's OT1 for me, Rich. I think the consensus is probably crazy, but again, Nania and we see it, and I don't want to be this guy, but like a lot of these opinions on these players are based on a quick Google PFF search and 5 minutes of highlights. But when you actually dig into every single play, you can start to maybe expand your thinking on these guys. And based on the way that like Bowers was hyped up in the offseason, like you said, you weren't provided any evidence. I think Bowers is a really good Yak guy, and I think Yak plays really well on YouTube highlights, and I think that's why people love him. But in terms of contested catches, like I very frequently found myself just shaking my head at my screen, like, oh, another drop, oh, another contested catch you didn't even get close to. So I don't know what he does that makes him such a stud, unless he's just going to be Deebo Samuel as a Yak guy, then okay. But he's not the athlete Deebo is, so I don't know. Tony you're talking about Fuaga. Yeah, Fuaga I'm not thrilled with if he was the pick. And then a lot of people are talking up Fatano as well from Washington. I can tell you that I watched him while I was watching Odunze. I was not thrilled with Fatano. If Fatano was a pick at 10, early impressions are I would be pretty disappointed. Got me sold on Latham. Joe, who do you like at 10, Michael? Michael kind of said it already, like he's prefaced it by saying he hasn't watched these guys a lot, so he might just reiterate like, hey, I like I like Neighbors, I like Latham as well. I think you'll agree with me when you actually watch reviews of those guys too. Latham was, and I put this on Twitter and you retweeted it. You know what happens? Nania, everybody's watching that Michigan game. Alabama, Michigan, at the end of the year, he gets blown up on a play where some people are questioning technique. It's actually a very common technique when a guard pulls for the tackle to step down and fill that void, and so the center can block back, and that's what he did. So he's kind of off balance as he stepped in. There was some foot traffic. He tripped over guys, got pushed back. Like, it wasn't the worst play in the world, but people, because that was put on Twitter, are going to extrapolate that as he had one bad play versus Michigan, so his other 1,500 plays he played that year were all bad as well. The rest of that game in Michigan was actually very, very good. So Latham is a severely underrated prospect, in my opinion, literally because of one play. Again, believe me if you want, believe or don't. If you don't want to, that's fine. But he's my OT 1 or 2 right now. I really, really like him, so I would sign the dotted line for him. Let's keep going on. MetLife.
You nailed the last Alabama tackle coming out in the top 10. Just a complete opposite opinion.
Yeah, that one and what's it called? The Burks one, because the Burks one, I questioned his effort on film, and then it comes out like a couple months later in training camp, like, oh, he's throwing up and he can't keep up. He's not in good shape. It's like, I wonder why. I don't know. Say it, Joe. You're not alone in that opinion by a long shot. Jason Blewett, the only imbecile in America that does not like Alter Bowers. Okay, Jason Blewett. Dude, I hate Jason Blewett. That guy's a douche, man. Jason Blewett's the worst. Would you take Brian Thomas at 10 over Odunze? I'll have to watch more Brian Thomas. Realistically, Hawk, I just want to be transparent. I liked him a lot when I was watching Neighbors, so that's something that's real. It's possible for me. Now, I want to go back and watch him to say, okay, I would have him over Odunze, but I think it's relatively realistic. Are you comfortable with Latham on the left side? I feel like he can play left, has all the measure. Yeah, I'm fine with it. Now, he's played right tackle throughout his career, so he would maybe start slower at left tackle, but could he play left tackle? Undoubtedly. Like, people are saying, oh, he's not athletic enough for tackle, aren't necessarily watching Andrew Thomas succeed. Like, Andrew Thomas is not the most athletic guy. He's fine at tackle, especially if you're moving to more of a gap power duo scheme. Okay, yes. He's definitely a good fit. So, okay, I'm at 740 in the chat, so I'm going to keep scrolling down. Fatanu, I mentioned that before, Big Daddy. I am not overly high on him based on what I've watched. Hollywood was there. Another guy, Nania, what, $9 million a year for Hollywood Brown? Now, again,
I think it was
two
7.
sides to every story. $7 million. We could have offered him 10 and be like, no, those taxes suck. I don't like Jersey.
Right.
I hate the color green. Fuck you guys. I'm playing. It's like, you never know. So I hate when people say, oh, we could have signed him. I'm not saying that you are saying this, Tony. I'm just saying for most people, like, oh, you could have. You have no idea. But another guy who I would have not been mad at. Thoughts on Andre Dillard? I know we've looked at him as a website collectively. He just got cut. I know Joe Douglas has maybe an infatuation with him. We're going to run with that nepotism theme that we go with the Jets, quite often. So, Kinlaw for $7 million, Andre Dillard for $8 million, when he probably deserves $3 million. But overall, what are your thoughts on Dillard?
I think he's a guy they could target just because of what you said, because, nepotism, just Joe Douglas liking first round picks and all that. But I think he's pretty awful. I mean, he was the first round pick with the Eagles. He didn't ever, break into their starting lineup. The Titans took a shot on him despite that. And then he's already cut out of there. So he's been pretty bad. So I don't know if they should be interested, but I think they could.
Yeah. Mikey Mull says, is there a player worth trading up for? I would kind of reiterate what I said before. Not one of the offensive linemen. I think Alt is definitely slightly overrated. Neighbors is a guy who, if you were sitting there at like 6 or 7, he was on the board and you filled tackle. Let's say Tyron Smith comes in, you solidify some other spots where you feel really good about your depth. If you want to make that big splash and trade it for Neighbors, and it's Neighbors and Garrett Wilson, I think that's a really formidable duo. So I would say Neighbors is probably the only guy I would consider. Hal agrees, says love Odunze, but he doesn't beat press coverage. And that was like the collegiate level. NFL level, he's really good. Nania, he has like no releases, like zero releases. So it's very concerning in that aspect with him. So, okay, let's see. Hey guys, is it me or does JD feel? Do JD's moves feel like are like that of a team competing for a bronze medal and are satisfied with acquiring scrap heap players for the same or for the team for the next season so far? I think this is where Nania, I'm not saying this is where Nania stands exactly, but this is where Nania was talking about, hey, go for Mike Williams, like go for the splash move, which we haven't seen yet. So yeah, it does feel a little bit silver, bronze medalish right now. And that's why we want that splash, right?
Yeah, for sure. I think, I think this is really the main point for me, because it's like say a bronze medal is the equivalent of making the playoffs, win one playoff game. I think you could do that with some of the moves they made, and if you add a couple more of those moves into there. But yeah, I think if we're trying to get over the top and win the Super Bowl, there are it's a good time to go all in on players that could raise your ceiling.
Yeah, Clowney played for $6 million. Did he really only play for $6 million last year? That's surprising. And even like Mike Williams,
I think it was. I brought it up before. It was only 2.5 last year he signed for.
Who was that dude who's like a Giants fan who's like breaking
like 4.5 with bonuses? But Clowney was cheap last year, but it was $10 million the year before that. But I think he's going to be in the double figures because he just had a huge year. Last year he got underpaid because he wasn't that good the previous year, but he was very good this year in Baltimore.
Now, Nania, I know we have like another special Giants insider who's like legitimately breaking news. Are you going to ruin him as well and expose him, or what do you think? Because I saw him on Twitter and like he was saying something like $8 million for Mike Williams. Yeah, like this Ricky dude who's like actually breaking stuff. But like, Mike Williams.
Whenever one of these guys come up, whenever one of them come up, I'm willing to give them a shot if they can prove themselves. I mean. Just like last year, I was like, the Reddit guy, I thought he was pretty legit. So I was trying to give him some credit. So I'm willing to give these random people a chance. But I looked into him, and I didn't have to scroll that far to see him miss multiple times. I think he just throws out a lot of takes. He's just on a good run of luck here. But he missed multiple pretty recently. I don't think he's legit. Yeah,
because he said Mike Williams $8 million. It's like what? Like okay, sign me up for that. But let's see. Fatano is a good, I'm with you. Good mover, but he's like very out of control, right, Harold? Cayuca Lake says, Blewett, who is your Evan Neal of this year's class of offensive talent? I don't have an Evan Neal. I definitely don't have an Evan Neal. Evan Neal, again, legitimately a guy I would not have drafted until like the 3rd or 4th round that year. I hated his film. There's nobody I hate. I would say just overrated in general. Alt, I would say, is overrated. Still my 1 or 2. Just I'm very concerned with him versus power and how high-waisted he is. Fashanu is somewhat pro-ready in the pass game. I think he relies on one set too much, and he could struggle versus power at the NFL level because he kind of gives his chest up and leaves his feet when he's punching. So I would say those 2 guys I'm lower on than the consensus. Bowers, I'm definitely lower on. So we're talking about guys I'm lower on than probably those 3. While also acknowledging I'm still a fan of Alt. Bowers is a guy who I've been fighting the herd with, but Treylon Burks, Jason, Burks over Garrett Wilson. Yeah, Burks was another guy, dude. I did not understand people valuing him as a player. He was pretty bad with Ole Miss.
Similar with the Yak, I think, compared to I think it was Arkansas, but similar. You said with Bowers how like Yak is kind of lends itself to highlights. That was kind of the deal with him too, I think.
Yeah, and like jump balls and stuff like that. So, okay, we're at the end of the chat. Nani, is there anything else you want to highlight of free agency, maybe predictions, anything like that before we hop off? I know you just did Cool Your Jets with Morstead, so check that out. I know you're going on stream with Rivka on Sunday, I believe. I'm not sure the time on Sunday, but check that out with her. But is there anything else you want to add in terms of like thoughts, predictions, anything, or is it time to call it?
I mean, I think we hit a lot of it. I mean, do you have any particular? How about predictions? You want to put like your gut feelings in of what's going to happen? I mean, I think I have a few. I think Bakhtiari feels pretty likely to me. I think they'll do that. Corey Davis, I think that's going to happen. Boyd, I feel like I'm just going out things that feel like there's at least some smoke. So I think those 3. I don't see Clowney happening. On top of that, I mean, those are really the 3 that I feel like are going to happen. I think they're going to complete this free agency pretty economically. There's not going to be that splash that we're looking for, and they're going to get the tackle in the draft, couple him with Bakhtiari. You got two guys in there. Bakhtiari isn't healthy. You got the rookie. If he is, then the rookie can develop, but he's also there as a backup. Then at receiver, I think they're going to round it out versus going for the splash. That's my hunch on what they'll do. I mean, do you agree with those 3?
Yeah. Bakhtiari feels inevitable, right? So it feels like Bakhtiari tackle at 10, if I had to predict. The positive side of me wants to say Boyd and Corey Davis, but like the negative side of me wants to say like OBJ and Corey Davis, which I wouldn't be thrilled with. I think OBJ is, surviving off that catch off his name more so than what he actually is. And maybe I'll be impressed going back and watching him, but I'll err towards positivity and say Boyd, Davis, I think some type of pass rushing specialist edge rusher is signed for $5 or $6 million. Hopefully they re-sign Ashton Davis. If it's not Ashton Davis, another depth safety would probably be my prediction for the rest of free agency in terms of like the bigger moves. But I think that's
a running back in there too. Yeah,
a running back, a guy in day 3 of the draft as well. John Hassel says, Dakota, that we need a weekly show together. I don't think. Maybe not weekly. We are quite busy, but Nania definitely jumps on more during the off season. But yeah, maybe I should have Nania and Sabo rotate or a little bit more than we have been, because it's definitely fun to talk to people. Yeah. And when I talk to people, I could actually drink coffee and liquids during it. I'm not just talking to myself for 2 hours. So it's definitely fun. Please no OBJ, Jets drafting receiver, wide receiver 2. Okay, yeah, we'll call it. I will get out of here. I have plenty of reviews coming. I know I'm kind of in like the bat cave right now with a lot of the reviews. I think right now, Nania, I have 25 reviews cooking. And all of them are pretty much done. I have 7 guys in the draft who are done. I have like 12 or I have like 10 Jets players. They're all done. All the free agents I'm working on. So I have a lot of film coming. At least 7 of the players will be released before the draft, because those are all draft guys. So look out for Neighbors, Odunze, Latham, Fuaga, Fashanu, Alt, and Bowers. And then Nania, do you have anything else upcoming other than, I'm sure, 1,000 articles on possibilities and the guys we sign and everything? You're gonna get everything with Nania, so that's pretty much what it is. But what do you have going on?
Well, yeah, check out the Thomas Morstead interview that we posted on Cool Your Jets today. He's always awesome. He just gives such insightful answers and goes well beyond what I think we ever expect him to sort of give. It, like, he's, in terms of interviewing a player and wanting to get a feel for what it's like to be in the NFL, he is as good as anyone that we've interviewed. So he's super fun to talk to. Check that out. Sunday, Rivka and I will be going on. I think that'll be later, probably like maybe around this time on Sunday, if I recall correctly. But yeah, just articles are coming every day. Plenty of terrible tweets that get ratioed every single time. Look out for those.
Dude, Nania, nobody on Twitter, man. Nobody on Twitter gets more hate than Nania for no reasons. Again, people are putting up karate videos of them chopping off Nania's head when he's completely right on Dalvin Cook and all these signings, and nobody necessarily apologizes. But I've said it before, and I've defended you. I think it's because you have like that. People think you're the nerd, so it's like easy to dunk on you. But Nania is more right than he is wrong. So he gets dunked on consistently, but that's what happens. You have like 35,000 followers and people look for your opinion. People get jealous. It is what it is. So bow down to the analytics king on Twitter for Jets Twitter and overall Twitter. So we appreciate Nania here. And another question: how much money did you have to pay Aaron Rodgers, Quinnen Williams, Mosley, I think Sauce Gardner, to stand behind you completely still the entire podcast?
Oh yeah, I mean it was a decent bit, but I mean Rodgers, like, he was mad at me for like trying to rat out the source last year, breaking the news. But like we kind of had a heart to heart. He was also mad about the AI voice videos I made last year. That was another thing. You did do that. Recently, I was looking back at some of my posts and all of our posts from like this time a year ago, or really like a week ago from today. But that whole Aaron Rodgers thing, that was insane.
Yeah,
like we were all on a different level there than we've ever been before. Just what a wild time. But yeah, they're really still back there. Got to give them credit.
Nerds split the atom. Nerds run the world. Michael Nania, do something original, and that's what we will end on. Do something original. Nania, we appreciate you. We appreciate everybody on the chat, and I will be back next week, maybe with Sabo. Nania will make an appearance, I'm sure, again in a few weeks. We'll have him more frequently now that actual things are happening and we can get his numbers plus his film, plus my film. So make sure to check out him, Jets X Factor, Michael Nania on Twitter, or Michael_Nania on Twitter, Joe B31 on Twitter for me. And we will catch you guys next time.